Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and the pleasure falls to me to welcome everybody here to our virtual meeting of Council for Monday, July 4th at 7 o'clock. A little bit of explaining on why this is a virtual meeting. So our main council chamber is actually under a renovation right now. It's being rewired to better accommodate hybrid and virtual meetings going forward in the future. And so is the committee room and behind it as well. And so it'll leave us in a better position to provide as close to an in-person experience for people who are joining our meetings virtually going forward. So for tonight's meeting, we do have a room here in District Hall at Skyline. Members of the public are welcome to go into that room and view the meeting as well as make presentations in that space, or they can participate through the Zoom app from home or wherever they may be. All members of council are going to be joining this evening's meeting virtually today, and also members of staff. And throughout the course of the evening, we'll probably have members of the public participating in different ways as well. At this point, council, I do have an agenda that's been circulated. I'd like to make one minor change to it, or ask your consent for that. When we got to the tail end of the last regular meeting of council, we had one item that we couldn't finish in the time. The normal practice would be to push it to the beginning of the next meeting. But in our discussion, we said that there was time on the July 18th council meeting and that we were going to continue the discussion on the July 18th meeting. But in reviewing that, the mover of the motion or the writer of the report, Councillor Curran, is not going to be joining us on the July 18th meeting. And so I felt it was best to put it back to you to see if we can add it to the end of tonight's meeting so that we can consider that matter with Councillor Curran here. So it was item 8.9 from the last meeting, which was, Councillor Curran, what's the title of the report?
It is Local Food Systems Action.
Local Food Systems Action. So we'd be adding that to the tail end of tonight's meeting as item 8.11. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bond, I saw your hand. Oh, and the other thing we needed to consider is that at staff's request, we're withdrawing the Lionsgate naming item, which I think was 8.4, was it? Yeah, 8.4, the naming of new streets at Lionsgate Village. There's just something else that staff had to consider before we have the discussion on that matter, and so they've requested it be withdrawn. So I'm moving, so the agenda put forward, hopefully with Councillor Bond's consent as the seconder on the matter, is that 8.4 is withdrawn. That will be considered on the July 18th meeting, and that Councillor Curran's report is added back into the agenda as item 8.11. Councillor Forbes, you have a question on the agenda?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the content of the motion you're moving to put on tonight's agenda, but I don't believe that's been advertised to the public. So procedurally, I think that's kind of unfair to people who might want to speak to that from the public. Is there a possibility, I don't know, is there a possibility that Councillor Curran can call in if she's not able to actually physically attend?
So the item was already advertised at the beginning for the last meeting, and 2 members of the public did already speak to the item at the beginning. And so we feel that in that the public has had an opportunity to be prepared for the item to be discussed. We just ran out of time at the last meeting. And our normal practice would be to add it to the beginning of the next meeting.
I understand that, but it's not advertised for tonight, but whatever. I just think procedurally, we should have left it for the 18th, but that's fine.
I'll just verify with the clerk. Are we in order by adding the item with council's consent to tonight's meeting?
Through your worship, yes, council may add an item to the agenda while during the adoption of the agenda by motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that is my motion. Councillor Bond, you second it with the other change, the 8.4 as well. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the motion on the agenda. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, council. Going through the start of the meeting, we normally would consider minutes at this time, but we don't actually have any minutes, I believe, that are being considered. And so at the front end of every regular meeting of council, we preserve a period of time of up to 30 minutes to hear input from the public on a variety of items. We give priority to items that are being considered at the evening's meeting. So members of the public have been signing up ahead of the meeting and letting our clerks know, but I have a list of 3 people that would like to speak on agenda items, 1 person who would like to speak on a non-agenda item, and then we also have people signed up to speak at items 8.5 and 8.6, okay? And so we'll work through those, but we should still have enough time for additional speakers. And so if you would like to speak, raise your virtual hand at the time once we get to the end of the list, and we'll move you over and hear your concerns for the meeting. At this point, so we're going to go into public input, and the first speaker that I have is Alexia Tripon, sorry, followed by Theresa Lewinska. Alexia Tripon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. One moment, let me just, there we go. Can everybody see me?
Yes, there you are. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today. I'm sorry we all have to go through this. We just didn't know that we needed to get a permit. Nobody along the way advised us about any need to get a permit for the retaining wall that we built. We were naive. I'm sorry?
Alexia Tripon is talking about item 8.6 tonight, which is the variance permit, I believe, on Phyllis Road. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Carry on. Yeah.
We worked really hard during the process to coordinate with our neighbors and to accommodate their wishes. As Curtis will mention, this is our first home. This is our first time we've ever been property owners. So this has been a bit of a rough ride for us, as you could appreciate. We did buy the house off market, and maybe in doing so, we bit off more than we could chew. It wasn't quite a quick fixer-upper as we thought it was going to be. Once we got the property, our bank issued us a deadline to do renovation work in order to qualify for a home improvement loan, which was only 2 months. We needed to bring the house up to date, but instead we had to use a huge chunk of the money on the surprise retaining wall. When we approached the neighbors, they refused to pay for any of the building costs because it was our problem, they had said. So we took on 100% of the wall. We were really overwhelmed at how much everything was going to cost to support the house, but we felt we had no choice but to get it done. We are really drowning right now as young people trying to exist in this market. Because this happened during the pandemic, there was a big labor shortage and we had a strict deadline from the bank. So we moved on the construction of the wall right away. Once we had completed the work, the neighbor had complained, and we were told by the district employees that for all of our permit applications, we needed to have a number of different drawings from different professionals that were going to take several months to produce. So during that time frame, the bylaws for the retaining wall height had changed. I think it's important to mention that the retaining wall work was not completed in a single day. This happened over a period of months, and Curtis and I were totally caught off guard that our neighbors had any issue with it, because we thought they were happy with the work done because they were aware of it the whole time and they hadn't said anything negative about it. I have to say that changing the design now is going to have a huge cost, and Kurt and I don't have unlimited funds. We work as creative people. We are not wealthy. Changing the wall will have an incredible financial strain on us, but we do understand that the geotech engineers would prefer to have the wall lower at the back, so we're more than happy to accommodate. We have worked hard with the district in efforts to modify the wall as close as reasonably possible to meeting the district bylaws. I hope that you consider our perspective and understand that Kurt and I are not out to do any dirty deeds against anybody. We genuinely care about our neighbors and about people in general. Hopefully you can see that reflected in our response, in the responses that our other neighbors gave to the district. And we hope you'll consider allowing us to maintain a reasonable height for our retaining wall at the property lines so that we are not going to incur too much additional costs in modifying what's there. I really appreciate the time of the district today. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next speaker I have is Theresa Lewinska. Theresa Lewinska, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I am the neighbor of Alexia and Kurt, and they are in neighborhood of the same houses. They were built in 80s. I lived in my house since July 1987. That's 35 years, and I was a second owner of that house. I am not direct neighbor, but I see the wall. Wall is just great, and I am so happy that finally that wall is done, and it should be done by the developer in 80s, in, I don't know, maybe 85. The similar, like in parentheses, there's 4 houses from 3970 to 3940. There are 4 houses, and between 3940 and 3910, that actually access is, it's our street is cul-de-sac, it's undrivable. Then there is a retention wall. I sent to Holly Adams the pictures. How big is that wall and how tall is that wall? Then what Alexia and Curtis at 3988 built, it's just a peanut. And comparing to right now 27 stories for Lionsgate Village, it is nothing. And safety is first. They really spent, this was not luxury what they've done. This was probably necessity that should be done and should be done way, way back. And what saddens me the most, that our children and grandchildren, they have to deal with that now. Then should be done long time ago. And they shouldn't go through that process of applying for a special permit because this is safety wall. This is not luxury like extended patio or extended whatever, okay? This has to be, that had to be done, and it is done. And withstand severe drought last year and severe rain, and it is done. And it cannot be lower right now because that will void warranty, whoever done that wall. And in this principle that it's easier to add something, but never subtract from the design. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Next speaker I have is Sergei Markhov, also speaking on item 8.6. Sergei Markhov, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I represent the geotechnical consultant slash designer of the retaining wall, 10 geotechnical consultants. We were retained by the owners of 3988 Phyllis Road to oversee the retaining wall. And however, our involvement was at a later stage of its construction. I'm going to explain why the wall is needed. As per our review, the retaining wall is located in a natural depression and attracts surface and below surface water flows. These flows may erode the soil adjacent to the existing house at 3988 Phyllis Road because the southeast corner of the house is located close to the natural drop on both east and south sides. This erosion was evident during our review. In the existing house and southeast corner of the house has settled due to this erosion. Also, the house is built closer to the ravine than other houses by about 8 feet on the north side and about 15 feet at the south, which makes it even more vulnerable. To control the natural condition of the site, drainage and erosion protection are required. Additionally, a large elevation drop differential exists between the house at 3988 Phyllis Road and the property to itself. A retaining wall suits these requirements and would support the house from erosion and further settlement, as well as protect the property below. A properly constructed retaining wall provides drainage and lateral support to the localized depression at the site, the southeast corner of the house. A large differential between the house at 398 Phyllis Road and the property to the south does not meet the bylaws. It requires creating a tiered wall in 3 feet intervals, and the space from the property line to the house is inadequate to tier the wall as the bylaw prescribes. So in order to meet the grades and support the existing house, an exceedance to the bylaw is required. A couple of words about the existing wall. We took into consideration the records the owner had during the wall's construction, and during our assessment, Turngeo checked the overall stability of the wall and stability of the slope, given the site's topography. Geotechnical report and design drawings were provided to both the owner and the district. Our assessment shows that the wall in its current state exceeds the factor of safety of 1.0 for its stability, which is okay for temporary structures, but not for permanent structures. And the factor of safety of 1.5 is required for permanent structures such as this wall. And therefore, we're proposing to lower the wall to meet the minimum requirements for safety and overall stability of the area. However, it'll still require the exceedance of the current bylaw. That'll be all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker I have is Doug Medley, followed by Peter Teevan. Doug Medley, can you hear me? I see Doug Medley is on the call and had his camera on a moment ago. Doug Medley, can you hear me? You're muted. There we go.
Hi.
Hi, there you go. Now I can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, that was very
you.
interesting about the retaining walls.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. I'm making a presentation that the District of North Vancouver should be a leader in improving and reducing the idling of their vehicles. So many people are, for reasons unknown, convinced that idling your engine for several minutes consumes less fuel than turning off and restarting the engine. The fact is, for every 2 minutes that a car is idling, it uses about the same amount of fuel that it takes to go nearly a mile. Research indicates that the average driver idles his engine 5 to 10 minutes a day. You know, we are all guilty of turning on our engines first and then checking our cell phone, right? Well, I think that we need to look forward to informing people about this behavior, improving things. We've all seen the Smokey the Bear infomercials, just to remind us to be careful in the forest. Experts recommend turning off the engine if you're going to be parked for more than 30 seconds. 10 seconds of idling can burn more fuel than turning off and restarting the engine. Plus, excessive idling can damage your engine's components, including spark plugs, cylinders, and exhaust systems. Because your vehicle's engine is not operating at its peak temperature when idling, fuel is only partially combusted, leading to a fuel residue buildup, and not to mention the exhaust that is coming out the tailpipe, which is my purpose in talking to the council today. So you've probably also been told that frequent restarting is hard on your engine. Fact is, it has little impact on engine components like battery or starter motor. By the way, your engine isn't the only thing negatively affected by excessive idling. Medical studies show that idling is linked to increases in asthma, allergies, heart and lung disease, and cancer. So it's time to turn off our engines. But why is it so hard for us? Now, I personally have observed municipal vehicles, road vehicles, idling their engines for over an hour. There is a kind of ethos where we think that this is okay. When I ask an employee about that, sometimes the answer is, well, we got to keep the battery up because we're using computers and other electronic devices. Well, I think the district should take a stand and become a leader. And first of all, step one, putting the vehicles on the trickle charge overnight so that in the morning you have a full charge. They don't do enough driving to charge their batteries. So many times I see municipal vehicles idling their engines. If they had a different procedure involved, they wouldn't have to do that. So trickle charge overnight. Oh, well, we take the vehicles home overnight. Well, then give them a trickle charge or in the yard. Oh, that's a big, it's an effort to do. Well, I'm saying the district should go in that direction and be a leader. Step 2, start installing larger batteries or additional batteries. And step 3, of course, is to help our drivers and our workers understand that it doesn't hurt to turn the engine off right away. So many times you hear people say, well, I'm just moving the vehicle shortly, or, service vehicles that come in and deliver heavy equipment, they always idle their engines.
We're over the 3 minutes. If you can draw to a close, that would be appreciated.
So I'm looking for any counselors who would be like to, that I can reach out to and talk to, and maybe the district become a leader and not idling their engines and training their people and employees to not idle their engines. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next speaker I have is Peter Teevan, followed by Hazen Colbert. Peter Teevan, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me okay, Your Worship?
Yes, welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Great, thank you. For the record, I think you all know my normal address. Today, my address is the beautiful shores of South Bay at Lake Whatcom in Washington State, where I'm down for the long weekend. But more seriously, Your Worship and Council, I did want to address 2 items on the agenda today. I'm sorry, I don't have my agenda right in front of me, but specifically, I'm talking about the issue of the affordable housing on district lands at Saint Denis and on Mountain Highway. And then also a quick comment about the embodied carbon moves in the next agenda item after that. The first thing I want to say is this. I think that, I remember well the words of you, Your Worship, and this council just after your election, that you wanted to reserve district lands for use for the most at-need people, social housing, supported housing, and not necessarily that was the proper use to build just more affordable housing. So I think we need to keep a very close eye on this. I have spoken with several of the supported and social housing providers over the years, and what they've told me is that it would be more helpful to them to get less units at a deeper discount than it would be more units near market rates. Because what they're having to do is draw upon resources from other housing projects in order to support the new acquisitions. And for that reason, I wrote you a letter some time ago where I suggested to you that you really think outside the box on the Fire Hall number 2 Mountain Highway site and consider partnering with a private developer that I believe that the main floor and several floors, the main floor should be commercial to be retained by the district and leased out at market rates, much like Lynn Valley Square, and upper several floors of zero cost to the provider's housing for special supported uses. And then market housing that would pay for the rest of it at top and do a joint venture. On Saint Denis, I believe that the people that ought to be prioritized for such housing are those who have been displaced by previous decisions of District of North Vancouver councils. And of course, forefront in my mind there is I think every one of the 61 families evicted out of Emery Village ought to be near to the first in line to get that housing. I don't believe that we need to build housing for affordable housing for people who haven't got a history of living in the district. Let their own municipalities provide for them. Lastly, just on the idea of embodied carbon, I'll tell you what the least embodied carbon is the building that's already there. So if you want to save the environment, stop tearing down houses and replacing it with new stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter Teevan. Next speaker I have is Hazen Colbert. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me?
Mayor Little, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
The first thing I'd like to ask Gabby is, do you see my photo or do you actually see me live? Well, actually, I'll ask anybody. Do you see my photo or do you see me live?
I see a stock photo.
Thank you. That's yeah. That was not my intent, but given my regrettably my limited Zoom skills, that's what I have to go with. I want to say that I didn't actually expect to speak tonight, but what happened with respect to Phyllis Avenue is when I read, I think his name is Markhov. When I read Mr. Markhov's input, I submitted that to a friend of mine who is an engineer. And I said to that friend, I said, is this credible? And he said, it's absolutely credible. This work needed to be done. And so then I said to him, well, if it needed to be done, do the permit people or the bylaw people have any choice but to not approve the work? And his response was, they have to approve it. I said, so then I said to him, well, what if somehow it wasn't submitted to them? He said, it doesn't matter. It can be submitted to them after the fact. But he said, this work has to be done. And that's what I'm saying tonight is I'm no expert on this subject, not remotely. So I sent it to somebody and guess what? They said that Mr. Markov's input is 100% correct. And if the District of North Vancouver just can't approve this, however they do it, then it should be treated as a private matter. And it would not be right for staff to get involved in fighting with a resident over work that is absolutely required based on the experts, unless the district is willing to put an expert as skilled as Mr. Markhov is. And I don't see that in the submissions tonight. There's no expert there. So all I'm saying to you guys is, you know what, when you've got an expert with the skills that Mr. Markhov has, you know what, the best thing to do, and I've done this in my own life, just to defer to the expert, okay? It makes it all so simple for everybody. And I know one or two people might not agree, well, then they have to bring their own expert forward, okay? So staff, I get it. You know, you want your say, that's fine. And council, I also get it. You want your say. But, you know, you've got an expert here. So just defer to the expert. Thank you, Mayor Little. Thank you to staff. And look forward to seeing Peter when he gets back.
Thank you for your comments, Hazen Colbert. I see one more virtual hand. Can we move Corrie Kost over to the panelists and Lyle Craver over to the panelists? And Casia Lieber, and then I think I'm going to have to cut it off at that because I think we'll be over the 30 minutes by that point. Okay, so I believe I have Corrie Kost up first. Corrie Kost, can you hear me?
Yes, Your Worship. You should be able to hear me now. It'll be very brief. In the previous presentation by Mr. Hazen Colbert, there was no image on the screen, no indication who that person was. So again, we get a different image, I guess, than the councillors do. Just
well, to be clear, just so if a person within the Zoom app, and this is just the behavior of Zoom, if a person doesn't have their video active, Zoom automatically places them lower in priority. So non-speaker, non-video, then higher priority is speaker with non-video, and then highest priority is speaker with video. It's a function of the app to some degree, but I hear your point. It's tough for the public to tell who's speaking at that time.
That's if you're an attendee or a participant, but the public, which was before I speaking, sees nothing of that. Nothing. You just see the councillors.
And we didn't automatically see it either. I had to scroll through all of the participants to see the picture.
Yes, at least you have that choice. You can see, but the public has no choice. Okay. Thank you, Worship.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kost. The next speaker I have Lyle Craver.
Thank you, Worship. You're coming through 5 by 5. I hope I am too.
You are.
Thank you. I speak tonight on item 8.7, which is the Community Service Advisory Committee annual report. It's a committee which I served on 4 years, 3 of them as vice chair, and it's a report that I have been reading with interest every year it comes to council ever since. Now, obviously, over a 10-year period, that committee is going to evolve. However, I remind you all that the committee started as a method of jurying district grants, community service grants, going back to the days of Mayor Baker. And it was made primarily as a way of jump-starting organizations that were very closely tied to the grassroots. There were very specific parameters that the committee operated on. One, it was not about providing operating grants for for social service organizations, and it was not about funding sports groups. Anyhow, this year's report is very interesting because there are a number of things I've not seen in past reports. Now, the need for funding has always been of interest to the committee. I mean, after all, there are always more hands than there are funds to accomplish them. But I note that the funds could probably go a bit further if we stuck to the original criteria, which was we don't do operating grants, we don't do sports grants. And in this year's set of grants, I see quite a number of both. Now, I fully understand the difference between therapeutic grants and sports grants and how the two, especially for special needs kids, can be combined. And those are fine, but generally speaking, those are the parameters of the committee. And within those parameters, I do feel the committee serves a very, very useful purpose. I too support the use of community grants in this way. Small grants, mostly to groups just starting off, primarily not aimed at groups receiving core funding. But again, the committee does a good service, it works hard, and provides excellent value to council for the money. So I give them my full support and hope you will as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for comments, Lyle Craver, and good points about the limitations on the grants. The sports grants are handled through the Recreation Commission via both sports and travel grants, which is why they're normally excluded from the CSAC process. But thank you for your comments. The last speaker that I have is Casia Lieber. Casia Lieber, can you hear me?
I can, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council, for once again providing me the opportunity to speak. And I am back to share some additional thoughts on the topic of local food systems action, as it is very important to me. And urban agriculture is something that I am very passionate about as both an entrepreneur and a city dweller, quote unquote. There is so much urban agriculture innovation that's already happening around us with urban farms on rooftops and inside buildings and in backyards. And no other municipalities in Metro Vancouver that I have been able to identify prohibit commercial agriculture except ours. Most actually support it, and there's no practical reason I can see that we shouldn't do the same in the District of North Vancouver. If there's concern about our urban farms producing food that is safe and with minimal impact on the environment, there are already checks and resources in place to ensure that this happens. For example, the Environmental Farm Plan program is a federal/provincial/territorial initiative that's funded by the Canadian Agriculture Partnership Program. It's an on-site audit, consultation, and certification delivered at no cost to farm operators, which identifies risks and opportunities to minimize their impact on the environment. With respect to food safety, the Government of BC, under Section 23 and 24 of the Food Premises Regulation, requires that operators of BC food service establishments and food processing facilities, which includes farms, develop, maintain, and follow a written food safety plan and a sanitation plan, both of which must be submitted to and approved by a local health authority. Beyond that, urban farms can undergo what's called a Good Agricultural Practices or GAP audit and certification to verify that sound food safety practices are being used. And this next point, which has been said before, but I will reiterate again, We are far too heavily dependent on international imports of fruits and vegetables, which are staples of a healthy diet. I, for one, don't feel very secure in that. Regardless of which international source you consider, we are very vulnerable. We're vulnerable to the water crisis in California, the practice of injecting produce with hormones and copper sulfates, the use of highly toxic farming chemicals, which may be banned here, but not abroad, the use of contaminated water for crop irrigation, the radiation and chemical treatments of preserving food for transport, and to the fluctuating fuel prices affecting the cost of imported food. I think it would be a real disservice to the community if we did not see it fit to proceed with implementing overdue changes to policy and bylaws to support development and progress of our local food system. As a community, we have a lot of untapped potential to improve not only our food security, but also to boost our local economy by creating new entrepreneurial opportunities. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, Casia Lieber. Okay. That wraps up the public input, although I did note that at items 8.5 and 8.6, we do have speakers speaking to those items as they come up. Moving on to the reports for this evening's meeting. The first report that we have up is bylaws 8496, 8497, rezoning and housing agreement bylaws for 405 Marie Place. This item is up for adoption. And so will somebody please move adoption?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Curran, second by Councillor Back. There's no discussion on adoption, and so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, and I didn't note anyone opposed. On item 8.2, this is the bylaw 8501 highway closure bylaw for 400 block Marie Place. Again, this item is up for adoption. Will somebody please move adoption?
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Forbes. I'll call the question on the matter. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with none opposed. Item 8.3, this is bylaws 8505, 8506, 8507, 8508, 8509. And this is, all these items are up for adoption. Will somebody please move adoption? Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Bond. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with none opposed. That's 8.3. The next item, if people missed the very beginning of the meeting, item 8.4 was withdrawn at the request of staff. And so that item will be returned back for our July 18th discussion. Item 8.5, this is development variance permit, or development permit 45.21 for 2320 Emery Court. And the recommendation is this item be issued. Is somebody willing to move that motion? I'll move the motion. Is there a seconder on the matter?
We do have a public input speaker at this.
Wow, we got to 8.5 real quick. Okay. So at this point, I will, I believe Chris Lee has joined us for item 8.5. Chris Lee, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay, I'll only take a minute. I'm representing the developer, Mosaic Homes, and I just want to let him know I'm here and available to ask or answer any questions you might have, and our architect's also here if anyone has any questions. Okay. Thank you. That's
very much. So I have moved it. I didn't note who the seconder was. Did somebody put their hand up to second?
I'll second it, Your Worship.
By Councillor Back. Is there any presentation from staff at this point?
No. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Yan Zhang, Manager of Development Planning. I'd like to make a really high-level introduction of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, give me a second. So tonight before you is, sorry. Okay. Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm experiencing some. Okay, sorry.
I can, and I can see your slides.
Sorry. I'll be very brief. So Mosaic Homes has applied to develop the property at 2322 Emery Court as a 46-unit townhouse project. This is phase 3 of their 4-phase redevelopment. The proposal requires council's consideration of a development permit presented before you tonight. Just for background, in 2018, council approved rezoning for the entire site to CD 115, and subsequently a development permit was issued for phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. That was done in September 2018, and both phases are under construction. This phase 3 is located at the southeast quadrant of the site, bordering the townhouse complex Yorkwood Park to the east, and then detached houses to the south. The proposal consists of 46 strata townhouse units in 6 3-story buildings above 1 single-level garage. The units are a mix of 3-bedroom and 4 bedrooms, and then have direct access from the underground parkade or from the common walkway. The proposed number of units, the floor space, height, and setbacks, and the parking are all in compliance with the CD 115. The project has been reviewed against and is consistent with the development permit area guidelines for form and development of ground-oriented housing, and energy and water conservation, and GHG emission reduction. Notable highlights from the form and development guidelines and responses include roof forms and roof pitches have been designed to be sympathetic to the established character of the area. The buildings are modulated by rhythm of gable roof lines, bay windows, porches, and generous roof overhangs with upper floor setback on elevations fronting the neighboring properties. A mix of building heights, materials, and design of each phase of development creates variation in building design. And lastly, the project will meet step 3 of the BC Building Code, BCBC Energy Step Code with low carbon energy systems. And so development permit tonight is ready for council consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've moved the matter, and just my comments on it. It appears as though they've met all the technical requirements for the permit to be issued, so I'll be supporting the permit being issued. Councillor Vac, your comments?
No further comment, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any other member of council wishing to comment on the matter? Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with none opposed. Okay, the next item up for discussion does have 2 speakers signed up to it. This is item 8.6, Development Variance Permit 6121 for 3988 Phyllis Road. The first speaker I have is Curtis Willis. And I'm going to go to the public speakers first, and then I'll come to staff for their comments. So Curtis Willis, can you hear me? Want to confirm, is Curtis Willis connected to the meeting?
Yes, I am. I am here.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for having me. I feel honored to be here. There's so many people who spoke on my behalf, and that of me and my wife, and I really appreciate that. I'd just like to say, Alexia and I, my wife, bought our first house, and it came with some surprises. And unfortunately, one of them was that we did work, what we thought was good for the house, and it turned out to be, it's still good for the house, but the work we did was unpermitted, and that's the bad part. And so I'm here today before you asking for some lenience on what we did, but also we went out and got engineers to look at it, and we listened to what the neighbor had to say about it, and we worked with the district planners to try and bring you to the point we're at now, which is still a little above the standard for what is now. So maximum retaining wall height which you may or may not know is 3 feet now, and ours is above that. But I feel like, as you may have heard from the geotech engineer, that there's good reason for having a higher than normal wall in our case, just because there is such a huge grade difference, and that grade difference is about 8 feet, and it takes place in a very short span. I guess I don't want to waste too much of your time, but I do think that what we did was necessary. I mean, I wish I had done it in the right order, but I'm here now saying, I'm sorry we did it that way, but I felt it needed to be done. And now that I know better, I'm trying to do my best to, my wife and I are both working to try and make this right and get it to the right place. So I hope you can consider that when you make your decision tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Curtis Willis.
Okay.
The next speaker I have is Arthur Rowland. Arthur Rowland, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Would you like to see my video? No.
That's up to you.
Good evening, Your Worship and distinguished councillors. My name is Arthur Rowland, and I'm the owner of 3970 Phyllis Road, that shares the south property line with 3988 Phyllis Road, and the only property that is fully affected by this proposed variance. I am here tonight to object to the proposed variance permit 61.21 3988 Phyllis Road, and that I ask it not be granted in its present form for the following reasons. 20 months ago, it was agreed that the owners of 3988 Phyllis Road built a small retaining wall to retain the soil in their garden. However, the resulting wall far exceeded the height allowable by the DNV and was built without permits or geotech reports. When we queried the height with our neighbours, we were informed that all permits were in place and we had no say in the matter as it was built in their property. Also, at that time, they removed several trees, including one from our garden, without permission or permits, that made up the structural integrity of the corner of our properties. As noted on page 502 of the agenda, I would ask that it be noted that the submitted picture at the bottom is not accurate and has been photoshopped, removing our tree from the picture. You will note that our properties sit on the edge of the Westland Escarpment, which has a very steep downward slope. Over the last 18 months, we have observed the wall has undergone deformation, resulting in large gaps and in the bricks and cracking. This has been confirmed by our own expert, which you should have a report of. Prior to the wall being built, we enjoyed our privacy, where currently, due to the height of the wall, we are subject to anyone, including tenants of the non-permitted secondary suite, having a direct view into our living area. We recognise the need to retain property, and we have no objection to anything the owners want to do, as long as it complies with the DNV guidelines. The new proposal is asking for a total height of 7.1 feet, which is a variance of 4.1 feet over the permitted regulation. In essence, the proposal is doubling the maximum height allowable. This fails to address our privacy and safety concerns. We understand the new proposal is presented as a reasonable compromise. However, we feel that the only people that are compromising is us, and this is unacceptable and not fair. We believe a fair compromise would be have a maximum height of the highest point to be 5 feet, which is 2 feet above regulation, as long as all permits and reports are in place and approved by the District of North Vancouver. We are incredibly concerned with the inherent risk that comes with building a retaining wall backing onto a steep slope. As we're all fully aware, slopes are unpredictable and retaining walls do in fact fail, as occurred on Chapman Way in 2005. Throughout this whole process, we have been painted as difficult and uncompromising, when in actuality, we simply want the rules that are put in place for a reason to be followed. We do not feel safety of our family, privacy, a potential loss in property or property value should be compromised at our expense, irrespective of how pleasant they may have come across in the neighborhood. In conclusion, we are requesting that the development variance permit for 61.21 for construction of retaining wall structure at 3988 Phyllis Road be not approved or issued. Thank you for allowing me to comment, and may I wish you a wonderful summer and all success in the upcoming elections.
Your comments, Arthur Rowland. At this time, I'm going to go to staff. Yan Zhang, you have some comments on the matter?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to make a really brief overview of the application, given the history and then the location of it. If I can just bring up the PowerPoint presentation, that'd be great. Thank you so much. So thank you, Your Worship. So tonight before you is a DVP application for retaining wall at 3988 Phyllis Road. Next slide, please. So the subject property is located in the Lynn Canyon area on the east side of the Phyllis Road and back onto the Lynn Canyon Park as shown in the aerial photo. The properties along this block are on the crest of the West Lynn Escarpment, a steep downward slope to the east. Next, please. Just in terms of the history of the work without permits, so repair work to existing house on site, which was built in 1968, and then building this retaining wall at the southeast corner of the property had occurred without any permits. And in November 2020, district building inspector put a stop work order on the entire property. So basically the house repair as well as this retaining wall that was under construction. And then November 2021, the applicant submitted a DVP application to seek height variance to the retaining wall. So this photo was taken from the applicant site, is from the side yard looking down into the southeast corner. And this is the pre-existing condition before the wall was built. And it was known between the neighbors that there was some soil slippage from the subject site onto the neighbor yard. Next, please. So this is a retaining wall as built, and those photos are taken from staff on a site visit to Mr. Rowland's yard. And as you can tell, is presenting a roughly 6 feet retaining wall looking into the neighbor's yard. And then a worst case scenario, which is fronting the ravine, is about 9 feet. So this DVP as submitted is not really supported by staff because the huge impact on the neighbor as well as the safety concern fronting the ravine. So as a result, the applicant has revised their design, and what's presented tonight is a revised design. Next, please. So the revised design is a two-tier system and generally try to follow the building the zoning bylaw. And we have a lower tier, lower wall that lower than what's proposed, what's built. And so it's about 4 feet in the middle of the yard, the middle portion of the yard, and then going down to about 5.6 at the lower wall. That's exposed to the ravine part. And then we have a second tier that's roughly 3.3 feet. And what's shown on the right-hand side is a perspective showing what the wall would look like without any privacy screens, whether it's fence or landscape. Next, please. So some words about the slope stability and safety concerns. So the site is located in the ESA, environmental sensitive area. A preliminary geotechnical report has been produced. And as you heard from the geotechnical engineer, that the wall is temporarily safe, provided that they lower the wall by certain amount, which that certain amount has been incorporated in the revised design as you see. So the top tier wall, the lower versus top tier design. So Should this move forward, a detailed slope assessment and drawings professionally assured by a geotechnical engineer are required, and that report is required to be registered as a restrictive covenant on title. The wall is required to be substantially rebuilt, and the investigation of stability and drainage, etc., will be required in a detailed report and through the building permit process. Stormwater management study will also be required. Next, please. So we did a first round of notification during staff review process. And what we did is notifying the abutting properties. So property to the north and south, as well as across the street, are notified. And we did receive letters in support, basically no concern. But the neighbor to the south, who are directly affected, wrote in to voice their non-support. Particularly, they're concerned about the wall as built without the permit, and the impact in terms of their privacy, and questioning about the structural integrity and safety, and creating some difficulty for them to place their fence. All those reasons. So staff did meet the neighbors on site, and as a result of those conversations and discussions, we have asked the applicant to come up with a revised design. And furthermore, we asked the applicant to do the landscape screening as you see on the screen, which is a 4-foot height cedar hedging in the lower portion of that wall. So, so with that, as the time when staff wrote the report to council, even though there wasn't any written consent, there was this sense that this is a compromise, and given the hardship on the applicant side and the mitigated impact, this is something that they can live with. So, the next one. So in accordance with the Local Government Act, as well as our development process bylaw, we did a statutory notification. And in this round of notification, we did receive one other household in support, as well as neighbor to the south in opposition. And in this round of correspondence, first, there are a few points raised, and I do know that mayor and council are also copied on those correspondence. There was a question about a dogwood tree that was cut without permit by the applicant, and that was claimed to be situated on the neighbor's yard. So because the tree was gone, we couldn't really find any evidence of it on site. What we did find is online, there was a site survey of the subject site prior to the current owner purchase, and it does show a tree on the shared PL, the shared property line. And so I think this matter, if this matter were to pursue, it could be a civil matter between the two neighbors. What the district staff will do is that we will retroactively ask them to apply for tree cutting permit, because again, this is a sloped area, this is an environmentally sensitive area, and then we will seek replacement trees. The neighbor also commissioned a third-party safety assessment of the wall. And so I will say that we have a copy of this. And so even though the assessment is not authored by a qualified geotechnical engineer governed by EGBC, what we will do is we will ask the geotechnical engineer on the job to look at this assessment and then to respond to every concern raised by this report. So just my last slide, please. I just wanted to lay out a little bit of process moving forward. So should the DVP be approved tonight or approved with any conditions as directed by council, then the applicant will be able to move forward with a building permit application showing the design that they are proposing tonight. However, if the DVP is not approved tonight, then the applicant will face a requirement that they have to take down the entire wall. And the district staff will ramp up enforcement action and give them some time to think about this, but we will be on top of it. They do have several options. The applicant do have several options. They can proceed with a zoning compliant wall design and submit a building permit. They can redesign, and if due to the site hardship, they need a minor variance, they can reapply for another DVP, and that would be a lesser variance request, and that will be subject to staff review, and ultimately council will be the decision maker. Or they can build a much lesser retaining structure and, following the topography of the land, and then, have other ways of reinforce the building foundation. So those are their options. However, the options that the applicant don't have is not to build a wall that is safe. So safe for the occupants of the land, safe for the neighbor to the south, safe for all the properties located on the slope, safe for the public who will be using the trail by the ravine, and as well as the drainage issue and the stormwater management must be handled upland, not draining into district land. So, with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your report, Yan Zhang. First speaker from council is Councillor Hanson. Do you have a motion?
Yeah, I move the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it seconded? Is there a seconder for the staff recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Back. Councillor Hanson, your comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll be supporting this development variant permit. I have visited the site, and it's a very challenging lot and a very difficult circumstance that the owners find themselves in terms of making their property habitable and safe in a way that is collaborative with their neighbors and environmentally sound. I believe that the proposal that has been put forward is the most practical way to remediate the instability on this site and address the challenges on the lot. I note that all but one neighbor is supportive. The neighbor immediately to the south, Arthur Rowland, who spoke today and was very articulate in putting forward his point of view, is of course not supportive. But I believe, having reviewed the staff report carefully, heard the presentation tonight, and most importantly, walked around the area, I believe that the proponent has done their very best to minimize the impacts to the neighbor. The two-tier design will minimize some of those impacts as well. The fence and appropriate landscaping can provide some of the privacy that is lost because of the retaining wall. And I agree in essence with the comments in the staff report that the proposal represents the most reasonable and best compromise as between the neighbors' concerns and the proponents' needs to stabilize and remediate the property. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Back, did you have any comments?
Not too much further to add. I totally agree with all of Councillor Hanson's comments there. I think he summarized the issue well. Something does need to be built here. It's clear that there does need to be a retaining wall of some sort. And I do think that the property owners in this case have done their very best to come up with a compromise that's going to work for just about everybody. I realize that it's not satisfactory to the one neighbor who we heard from tonight, but I do think that they've done their best to find a solution, and noting that this wall height has only been changed by this council in this term. So in this case, I think the variance is appropriate, and I'll be supporting it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Ms. Zhang, could you clarify what you meant by the geotech on this project is not qualified? I want my time stopped, please. You made a comment in regards to the geotech on this project is not qualified. Can you clarify what that means?
Yeah, I'm able to. Through your worship, Councillor Murray, I was referring to that the third-party assessment done by the Rolands that was done by a Bachelor of Scientist, someone with that degree, and is not a professional geotechnical engineer. So,
are we getting a qualified geotechnical engineer to inspect this property?
yes, we will absolutely will. Yeah. And
So,
that's a requirement of the permit.
So I'd like to know that. I mean, what happens if they come back and they say this is not going to work?
Then they will find an alternative design, alternative solution that will work, will meet the safe or intended use statements, the district natural hazard risk assessment criteria, I think, and also cross-referencing the district's 2008 slope hazard assessment that covered the whole districts. And there will be a design that will definitely work.
But that could void the need for the variance. That could reduce the variance, or in maybe in another case, well, I don't know if it would increase the variance, but that could change the scope of the variance, could it not?
So the scope of a variance is kept in two ways. One way is we measure the worst case scenario, which in this case is a 7.1 feet at the ravine. And then the second way is that we are basically attaching the drawing, the design as part of the DVP so that there is no additional height, you know, because we look at this in terms of minimizing the impact perspective. So that is actually a good question. I'm going to have to come back to you. If there is an alternative design that is needed within the variance height, the 7.1, what will happen?
In the drawing, could you please clarify in the drawing, the rear property line is extended out beyond the neighbor's fence line? Can you tell me why?
So maybe I'll ask Ms. Adams to pull up the site plan. Basically, where their fence is not their PL. Their PL is actually into the ravine. So there is no built area. So maybe.
So the neighbor's fence line sits on the edge of the ravine, whereas the applicants have gone to the edge as far as they could go in regards to containing their property.
Yeah, through your worship, I'll just use this one that's showing this is proposed site plan. I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Yes. So where there's the yellow corner where the two retaining wall join, that's where the neighbor to the south fence is. So basically, as you can see, the PL goes further to the east, and that's exactly where the neighbor's fence is as well.
But in the drawing with the white retaining wall, I'm not sure what page it's in on your presentation. Keep going. Oh, yeah, that one right there. Do you see how the brick, the brick goes beyond the neighbor's fence line? So
yeah, I think what
explain that to me.
I think what Ms. Zhang is saying is that the property lines for both properties are further down the hill from even where those two retaining walls, the retaining wall and the fence are.
No, I know, I understand that, but have they gained that extra space in comparison with the neighbors, because they've basically backfilled that lot to bring it up to grade? Like, it's above grade. It's, you know, it was done in order, I assume, in order to walk that entire area. And wow. So
we're having some connection difficulty hearing Councillor Murray, but I think I got. think I got the point of your question. You're saying, is the challenge because they've tried to flatten out so much backyard?
There's one thing to be able to fix a wall that's sloughing into your neighbor's yard. It's quite another to build.
Councillor Murray, are you able to turn off your video? Perhaps we'll get a better connection if you turn off your video for a minute.
Can you? Yeah, like we were dealing with a fence that was collapsing into the neighbor's yard. And now it looks like it's been expanded in order to, at the same time that it was. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm phoning in.
No,
I'll phone in.
I said yes. I can hear you much clearer now.
Go to someone else.
Okay, I can do that. Councillor, actually, I was going to make my comments next. Yeah, I have some definite concerns about this. I mean, when we went through the discussion about the retaining walls, my main focus was on the front of properties, on the streetscape, that you wouldn't end up with a fortress sort of effect on it. We certainly saw in the case of the wedge house, how laterally from property to property, a retaining wall can become quite oppressive on a neighboring property, which is one of the justifications for the new regulations. And so I'm left sitting trying to figure out what was necessary or not, because I believe that a lot of people have commented under the assumption that there had to be a retaining wall. And I think what I heard from staff was, had the natural slope been retained and kept, there was a minor slumping issue, but we wouldn't have necessarily automatically gone to a retaining wall. And the reason why we're ordering the replacement and upgrade of the retaining wall is because we're still operating under the assumption that we're going to flatten out the land on the northern property and extend their backyard. Is that fair, Ms. Zhang, that had they not interrupted the property in the first place or interrupted land in the first place, that we would not be requiring a retaining wall on what was there originally?
Yeah, Your Worship, this is a really good question. I think prior to the retaining wall being built, there is a pretty steep drop at this corner, and the neighbor to the south and then the applicant both noted that the soil is clumping onto the neighbor's yard, but not like in a big, volume of soil. So I believe some sort of, at a minimum, some sort of a retaining structure needs to be there. And could they be having the entire retaining structure meeting the zoning bylaw, but completely contained within their yard? Yes, it is possible. That means that their yard will be taken up by a retaining structure, but is possible. So in this case, they are able to get a bit of a flat yard, and it is definitely a benefit to them.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my frustration with it. This wasn't necessary. It added risk. It was done without consultation of the neighbors. It was done without permits to the municipality. There's an allegation, although we have no evidence to verify it, that there might be a secondary suite operating out of the house at this time. And I think that this is probably going to get issued, but it should probably be issued with a rebuke. You have responsibilities as owners of a household to make sure that the work you're doing in your house is safe, both for you, for your tenants, for the public land around you. And doing it in a substandard fashion is not acceptable. I've been in this situation where you get into a house and the cost mount, the condition it was left in from the previous owner was not what you expected. And I absolutely understand the situation, but it just can't be acceptable going forward to take risks with the property around you at other people's expense. If you're willing to put the retaining wall in the fashion that it was put in, with the blocks just haphazard in the pile, what else are you willing to do? And I want to make sure that this permit comes with a rebuke that says that that's not fair to your neighbors. It's not fair to the occupants of your building. And frankly, removing trees on a slope presents a tremendous amount of risk to the downslope areas. And so I'm very concerned that by issuing this, we're going to be rewarding someone who really has not seemed to be concerned about the people around them in a material way. Maybe that's not fair. You know, I don't think that, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that decisions were made without considering the impact on neighboring properties. And so I'm frustrated by this because, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think the restrictions that we put in place for the retaining walls, I probably would have, had this been right up at the front, I probably would have accepted this change on this property because of the hardship of the slope. But I'm now sitting there watching the series of decisions that were made on the property, and I'm frustrated by it. So I'm willing to support the issuance of the permit, but I really, you know, I think staff need to look into the matter of secondary suite, make sure that the building is built to a safe standard and that that other corners aren't being cut in the process to try to get this underway, because it's not acceptable to you know, add value to your house at the risk of your neighbors or your occupants. And so I'm frustrated, but I'm going to be supportive of issuing the permit. Next speaker I have is Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mayor Little. And perhaps it's a bit of an aside, but I think this is one of the challenges when you have an extremely technical and detailed issue in front of council where none of us are technical experts and we're relying on significantly limited information, far more limited than staff are of making these kind of decisions. You know, when I read the report, I read the line that said that the retaining wall was necessary to protect the foundation of the home. That doesn't seem to be mentioned. So that's in the report, that a retaining wall was necessary. You know, and you know, to the comments about, you know, how we're interpreting this, the current wall, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, the wall that's proposed has been reviewed and designed by the applicant's geotechnical engineering firm. The speaker was at the beginning of the meeting, Teevan Geotechnical, if I'm correct. So the wall that is proposed is properly engineered, and so the comments about it not being safe are specifically about the neighbors review with a person with a Bachelor of Science degree. So I do think, you know, it's very challenging to put individual councillors with limited information into making a technical decision about whether this wall is necessary or not. And so I'm going to be relying on our staff's review and the technical analysis provided by the professionals here, which say that this wall, as currently constructed, is safe as a temporary wall, and therefore something needs to happen. And what our staff are telling us is that what is proposed will be a safe wall. It will be properly engineered by those professionals that are qualified to do so. And the engineering and the design and review process is thorough, at least according to when I last did my annual update for my professional engineering degree. There is a level of professional oversight that those who design the wall are required to ensure that it is constructed to the design and it is constructed in a safe manner. So, you know, I understand, Mayor Little, the comments you make about doing work without permits, and I would 100% agree. And you know, often people get into challenging situations and make decisions that they would regret at a later date. But I don't see that as a necessarily a reason to reject this permit or to spend a significant amount more time on this issue. So I'll be voting in favor of the variance.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I guess what I heard from our staff is that this wall, the variance is to reconstruct this wall to a certain extent where there's a middle ground to compromise. And I guess I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, the compromise is to remove some of the lower levels to make it safer, but also, I guess, to have the rear yard remain level. And that's why there was sort of a compromise. Now, the neighbor to the south has had something built that is well above the rear lot geography of their lot in 2 levels, to the point where their enjoyment of their property has been significantly altered because this rear lot has been elevated to the extent that it has, and staff have concluded that there could be a removal as an option to lower the wall even more, which would, of course, change the rear yard topography of the applicant's property. I think, as the neighbor has pointed out, that this should be lowered. For a further variance, it should be lowered to find a better and more middle ground to still allow safety, which is our number 1 priority, and make sure the wall is safe, but also to further lessen the significant negative impact that the downslope property owner is being impacted by. Not to mention the impact, the concern that we have in regards to the property lower down, which is municipal property and access. So I do have the same concerns as Mayor Little. There's got to be some way, and there's been some allegations and some denials in regards to what was known and what wasn't. But as properties change hands, tax notices and addresses and names change, and there should be an automatic trigger by the municipality sending out an information package to new property owners on the do's and don'ts of property ownership. And certainly constructing significant structures such as this one without a permit is bullet 1. So I think that this variance is a middle ground to benefit the applicant. And yes, you're going to have to incur some costs, but this retaining wall was no cheap attempt at rebuilding. And I think there should be a lessened impact on the neighbor, to be fair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with both what you've said and what Councillor Murray has said. I think that first I wanted to ask staff for clarification. This, if there was going to be something different than what's proposed by, can you stop my clock?
You're still speaking.
Oh, okay, but stop anyway. If there was going to be a variance other than what's been presented tonight, is the wall that's there right now still the Allen block wall? And would the Allen block wall then have to be taken down right to the ground?
Zhang?
Yes, I'm happy to provide an answer through Your Worship. So if the wall is constructed to a good standard, then at least this will be partially rebuilt. So it has to be partially taken down to meet the DVP height. If we're talking about a lesser degree of DVP height, then yeah, they basically some sort of a substantial reconstruction of the wall will occur.
I would agree with some of the comments that have been said already about how this seems to be. I believe the applicant is trying to compromise here, but this compromise doesn't benefit in any way their neighbor. In fact, it still harms their neighbor. Their privacy, possibly the value of their property, is compromised, and therefore I don't think it's been an equal sort of compromise. And I don't mean 50-50, but I don't think there's been compromise on both sides. I'm not in favor of this 7-foot height. And when I look at the drawing, the one that Councillor Murray referred to, it appears like the level part of the yard, the top part, is like level with a staircase, the top landing of a staircase on their next door neighbor. So I think it's pretty intrusive, and I think that possibly, as you've said, Your Honor, if they hadn't attempted to build the wall in the first place, we wouldn't need to build as tall a wall as we are now looking at. So I understand that it says that it's necessary for the support of the house. A wall is necessary, but doesn't mean it's this wall at this height that's necessary. It means it needs to be safe and support the house, but it possibly doesn't need to be this particular height. So I'm not in favor of going forward with this, but I'm open to a variance at a lower height that will mitigate all the risks that are involved for the municipal land below and the neighbor beside, and perhaps not compromise the neighbor's property as much as this proposed wall does. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes. I see no further speakers on the matter. The matter has been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion, permit is issued with Councillors Forbes and Murray opposed. Thank you very much, Council. The next item up for consideration this evening is item 8.7. This is the 2022 Community Service Grants. We have staff presentation. I see Ms. Atva here.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council and community members, staff who are here today. I'm going to turn this over for a short intro by Erica Branson, our social planner. She's been working with the Community Services Advisory Committee quite diligently over the last number of months, and we'll walk you through this summary of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atva. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This report recommends that Council approve a total budget of $344,493 in funding for community service grants this year. It includes 60 applicants that are recommended for 2022 and 46 that are in their second year of their 2-year funding cycle. It also includes a 10% COVID-19 top-up, which was introduced last year to help alleviate some of the financial impacts related to the pandemic. A few changes were made to the process this year. Applications were reviewed by 2 Community Service Advisory Committee members working together, and joint recommendations from the pair were presented to the entire committee for funding consideration. A weighted scorecard was introduced that helped committee members determine eligibility and provided comparative data on 12 criteria. These 12 criteria came from district policy and other supporting documents, and included information such as the number of residents served, active volunteer involvement, and assistance for vulnerable populations. Lastly, nonprofits were invited to make presentations to the entire committee this year, which gave members a chance to learn about the nonprofit sector and also reduced any burden imposed on the agency or executive directors. Overall feedback from the committee was very positive towards the changes, and they said that they enjoyed working in pairs and very much appreciated the simplicity of using a scorecard. The nonprofit sector contributes to the health and well-being in our community, and the sector is very diverse and which is shown by the scope of work provided by the applicants. They offer a variety of programs and services across the lifespan and range from very broad to very specific forms of support. Staff was directed earlier this year by Council to explore an increase in funding for several our grant programs. This work is underway and we anticipate reporting back later this fall. The analysis will examine population growth and how this affects grant program budgets, and it will also incorporate some of the upcoming 2021 census data, including the income information that will be released later this month. Staff is also planning a broad assessment of community needs that will be based on engagement with our service providers. For now, the proposed 10% top-up provides some benefit for this year to help nonprofits manage current spikes in need related to the pandemic. Thank you, and I welcome any questions that you may have about the report.
Thank you very much. Members of Council, looking to you for your direction. Councillor Kern? Councillor Hanson, you have a motion, Councillor Kern?
I'll move the staff recommendation to.
Councillor Hanson, I have you second up. Will you be seconding the matter? Okay, thank you. Councillor Kern, your comments?
Thank you to staff and all of the community partners who put forward this application. As someone who also works in the nonprofit, and I know how difficult it is to go through all of these applications. And so I appreciate the work of going through that, and with the members of our community who go through and spend time trying to decide where to contribute these funds. I'm sort of a common thread that I see through this, which is something that we know, is that COVID has not impacted people in the same way. And I think that comes through in a lot of what we're hearing from our providers. And so that there's some interesting feedback around the increase in food insecurity, especially in seniors in our community. That there was a statistic that was quite shocking. I'm not referencing it right now, but I think it was up to a third of adults over age 65 are food insecure in Canada. That's a pretty shocking statistic. And yeah, so I appreciate the work that goes into this. I am pleased to see the top up that I think was at council direction, and just all the work that goes into this. And I think that the majority of council did say that we would support additional funds as well. And I'm not sure if staff could comment on that, if this is the result of council direction, or if there's an opportunity to continue that conversation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran through Mayor Little. Yes, the report mentions some of the work that's still underway with regards to a larger possible budget increase. This report does identify the 10% COVID increase that would be applied to all of the recommended grants subject to council's decision today. The work to look at a larger budget involves a number of steps. This includes firstly looking at our population and our growth. We've got some of that info from the census already. We'll be getting more information this month, starting with income data, for example. We will be working with our some of our stakeholders and tapping the committee again for insight around where the greatest need is. We know through our various grant programs that, at least in planning, that we administer core grants, community service grants, childcare grants, that we touch on a number of different sectors, seniors, youth, vulnerable populations. Where is the most need? Where should the community, the municipality be focusing a potential increase in budget? So this work is underway. We will report back to council through the budget cycle, as well as separately on recommendations.
Thank you for that clarification. So today is the allocation with the 10% one-time COVID top-up, and then 2023 financial planning will be when we will look at increasing the funding for community service grants. I think that's accurate. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Curran. The next speaker I have is Councillor Hanson, seconder on the matter. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to support the motion, which is before us, the $313,000. for the grants and the $31,000 top up. I'd like to thank everyone involved. Thank you, Councillor Kern, for your comments, and all of the staff who have participated, and in particular the Community Services Advisory Committee, who went through the painstaking work of analyzing these grants. I just want to speak more about how I believe we should increase these grants. I think these offer excellent value for money for the district. I recently attended the annual general meeting of the Family Services Society of North Vancouver and was reminded in that, as I am so often reminded by these bodies, how much work is done and how much leverage we get, how much benefit we get from the monies that we do spend. And I look at some of the reductions that were made with respect to the grant process in this case, and I've just picked three at random, and I don't want to minimize all of the others, but looking at the WAVA rape crisis, they put in a proposal for $10,000 and it was reduced to $6,400. If you think of what could be accomplished perhaps with the remaining $3,600, which is such a small sum of money in the whole scheme of our budget, Parkgate Community Services, Seniors Kitchen, cause that all of us would be so committed to, request for $3,500 gets trimmed back to $2,447. And I'll just pick one other, Hollyburn Family Services, Aboriginal Mental Health, a $3,000 request was trimmed back to $2,000. And I just put the $313,000 over the context of our budget and the needs in our community and how focused some of these grant applications are on some of the most pressing social and community problems that ours and other community face. And I really think that I've said this each and every time this has come before me on council, so it's now the 8th time, but I really believe that we would get excellent value for money for increasing this. And I thank you. Those are my comments, and I realize the review is underway, but I just wish my voice to be put forward for increasing these grants once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just be brief. I would agree that when we come to doing the budget for next year, that I would certainly support looking to add more and certainly not losing the 10% should we find ourselves not in such a COVID-19 crisis as we have been the last couple of years. So I think that we get more bang for our dollar and we help an awful lot of people. So as Councillor Hanson said, in the scheme of our budget, a little bit more money goes a long way. I would only like to mention that I think it's been this type of work going through and looking at grants and working it out is very time, labor sensitive, and I want to thank the committee for doing it, and the amount of work that goes into this is quite a bit, and I appreciate the work that they've done. I just wanted to mention that I think having a scorecard now, weighted scorecard for the people that are doing this for us on the committee makes it a much fairer, more transparent, and possibly easier way to look at the process and come out with their decisions. I also want to mention that I think that having all the nonprofits do a presentation before all of the committees so that the people on those committees get to learn more about those nonprofits is an excellent thing to do. So I would just like to say that the new innovation that came along with the process this year, thank you very much. And thank you, staff, for your involvement in doing that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I do want to just echo the comments and the previous comments that we need to look at the budget again. I think we all agree that, there's nonprofits that are doing more with less, and certainly the impact in the last few years, has been big. There's a number of other situations that many of them find themselves in as well, increasing lease costs, being able to find homes for their operations. And we do really need to look at, this number. The type of work that they provide is invaluable in our community, and we need to support them accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Someone needs to be the grumpy curmudgeon here on this matter. First of all, I absolutely want to thank the committee for their hard work they did. It must have been gut-wrenching to have to make some of those decisions. I fully support the decisions you had to make, and want to be absolutely certain that I'm not in any way taking that away from you. There's a reason why it's arm's length, and that is because you guys can have the sober judgment over all of the decisions that have to be made in this field, and I fully support you on that. In the long run, I think that the amount we contribute back to social services in the community should grow with our community. It should generally move around with that. But the challenge is there are other sources that are just better. The provincial government makes most of their revenue from resource extraction revenue and from income taxes. And that should be the primary source of funds for charitable and social service works in our community. Property taxes are not a fair way to assess that. We have a major problem with affordability in our community, and adding to people's tax bills is not going to help improve it. Whereas the provincial methods and mechanisms that they have to raise funds are more fair and equitable than the one hammer that we have as a municipality. Also, these organizations, many of them, and all of them would probably qualify for it, but that they have charitable numbers. They have the ability to fundraise and give out tax receipts. And there needs to continue to be pressure on these organizations to do fundraising and to go out and find supporters, donors, people who want to support their causes, people who want to specifically get invested in those organizations. And when the government comes along, we deprive them of the ability to build those relationships in the community and build that legacy support from organizations. So while I do think that our overall support should fluctuate with the growth in our community to some degree, I'd be very cautious about us stepping into the role that the provincial government is obligated to provide, which is direct support for social services in our community. We need to apply more pressure on the provincial government to increase their portion and their contribution, and the tools that they have to collect the money for that are so much more equitable than the tools that we have as a municipality. Again, to the group, to the volunteers around CSAC who've done this, I've never served on CSAC, but I know it must be a gut-wrenching decision you have to make when you have to say this legitimate organization who does amazing work in our community can't get their full grant. But it's, economics is taking a limited amount of resources and applying it to an unlimited need in your community. And we put that burden on you, and you exercise that work very judiciously. And I just wanted to say I appreciate the work you do. Councillor Back, your comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. And sorry, you should have had the last word here, but what I'm going to say is not too controversial. I do agree with many of the comments that have been made, and I do support the staff recommendation here as well as the 10% top up. I really just wanted to pass on my sincere thanks to members of the CSAC committee. I think the job that you do is certainly one of the more challenging ones as a volunteer on this committee. So thank you very much for taking the time that you do to go through all of these applications. It must be incredibly challenging to make some of the decisions that you do. One comment I wanted to make, and I've made it before, is that I wonder sometimes if there's other ways that we can help some of these service organizations where it's beyond just financial help, but maybe there's a sharing of resources or looking at district facilities that we might be able to help potentially house or help support some of these different organizations with. So I'm not sure the best place to have those types of conversations, but I'm just interested in kind of connecting these organizations and looking at ways that we might be able to help them as an organization beyond just financial contributions, which I totally support and agree that it needs to be something that needs to be looked at in the next budget as well.
Thank you. I don't know if there's a staff response to Councillor Back's last point.
Thank you very much to Councillor Back through the mayor. I guess some of the ways that come to my mind on how we try and support nonprofit agencies, how we share resources. An example, the current work on poverty reduction strategy, which was at council for an information update last week, bringing the groups around the table for the task force there and trying to find ways to connect. So it isn't just the municipality taking action, but action that agencies themselves can do on that particular strategy. I think that is a very good point, and we will continue to look for that. And perhaps this is something we can integrate into the review process, stakeholder engagement that we'll be designing and carrying out this fall.
Great, thank you very much.
Mr. Milburn, further comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. But just to add to that discussion, I think Councillor Back raised an excellent point that it's not just grants that we provide support to, it's nominal rents or reduced rents to some organizations that have tenancies within district lands. And so that's part of the information gathering and coalescing that we're going to be bringing back to council, so council can see the full picture in terms of the support provided to organizations, not just the reduced rents I mentioned, but also support with building maintenance and other costs, as well as, of course, the direct grants. So there's lots of support there in the community, and we want council to see the full picture when we come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, your comments.
I just have to push back on the curmudgeon a bit. And
I knew I was going to get a redirect on this.
Good. Because I think, your comments 10 years ago, I would have, let you have, you could have gotten away with them. But now, as you know, Mayor Little, to suggest that these organizations go out and do more. And I know you get this. We're living in a different world. It's harder to do more. It's hard for us to just get volunteers on our committee. It's hard for a lot of these organizations to find volunteers to support their work. There's more and more people wanting to access these services. There's more challenges in regards to finances and taxes, deliveries of, programs to support families, that need, meals, with gas prices going up. All of those things are impacted. So everything is connected. We are all connected in one way or another. And I think it's not just what we can do as far as a municipality in regards to reduced rents and, all of those things we do. It's what's impacting them and how they are having to squeeze, the last penny out. And they do it, incredibly because they work hard and it's a commitment of passion that they do this work for. So yes, we need to push back to the provincial government. We need to be able to, live within the times and understand that everything is changing and things are costing more and there's more challenges in having the people that do this work, many of it, on a volunteer basis. So I look forward to this discussion. It's a discussion that needs to happen on so many other levels, and I'll look forward to that when it comes back.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Fair ball. When I was the head of a nonprofit, I was in donor development for them, but the environment is very different now, and I know it's a challenge, but it's pressure's on all of us. Okay, I see no further speakers on the matter, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, just as we go into the next item 8.8, a reminder that item 8.11 is coming up, and if council members have an opportunity to open the council package from the June 27th meeting, it is item 8.9 on the June 27th meeting, the last item that we did not get to address at the end of that meeting. That is the report we're going to be discussing at 8.11. But at this point, 8.8, we have the 2022 childcare grants. Again, I see Ms. Adva first.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little. Erica will give a short overview again. The childcare grants is another one of our annual programs, and I think I'm quite proud to know that this municipality distributes, at least through some of the programs that I work with more on a daily basis in planning, close to $2 million in grants. So the childcare grants portion is a smaller piece of that. There is also a very diligent committee that works through a number of months to look at where the requests are, where the need is, and we also have approved by council a couple years ago, I guess coming up to 2 years, the childcare action plan, which gives us a lot of instruction on where we want to focus our effort. I'll turn it over to Erica Branson now, with your permission.
Please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council again. There are 19 applications that are recommended for childcare grants this year, totaling $57,544. There are also 3 additional requests from agencies to carry unspent funds from 2021, totaling $7,075 that are being recommended. The 10% COVID top-up is also being proposed to alleviate some of the financial impacts related to the pandemic. This year, many of the grant requests are for projects that will enhance the quality of care for children. Several centers want to make improvements to their outdoor play space, and some have requested funds to purchase additional equipment, such as a fridge or a toilet that will improve space function, or in one case, allow them to increase their licensing capacity. A few requests are for staff wages that are linked to very specific roles. For example, a center that has a programmer that's focused on the middle years because they recognize the diversity amongst the needs of kindergartners all the way to preteens. And then there are also a couple of requests for funds to provide workshop for parents. The three agencies that have requested to carry over funds are for child-minding services, while parents receive supports or attend group sessions. Each of these agencies has now returned to in-person programming and will be using the funds to resume their child-minding. So thank you, and I welcome any questions regarding the report.
Council, looking for your direction. Is there a mover? Okay, Councillor Hanson, is there a seconder on the matter? I'm happy to second the matter. Councillor Hanson, do you have any comments on the matter?
Not too many. Thank you very much for the staff recommendation and all the hard work. My comments would really mirror what I said earlier with respect to social service grants. These grants, in my view, make a huge difference to a lot of people. Childcare is a very topical area. Very pressing need in our community, and I frankly think we could go farther than $57,544 given the resources we have to bring to bear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I'll be seconding the matter. I did have a question. Ms. Branson, do you have a sense for how the childcare industry is adjusting to people only working from home or from work a mixed number of days, not necessarily 5 straight days, which I understand that lots of the childcare places were really built around having consistent students or clients 5 days a week. And now you may have a family that only needs coverage, 3 days a week or 4 days a week. How is that going to be accommodated in childcare services in our community?
Thank you, through your worship. I think that a lot of parents are still, even if you're working remotely, are still requiring that consistent routine for childcare. So I think what we're seeing is, parents, if they have a flexible work schedule, they would still have their kids in, if they're in before and after school care, or preschoolers that would be attending sort of the full days. I think having flexible hours for folks who are working in shift work still continues to be a bit of a challenge for us. I think a lot of the childcare providers, just recruiting staff is easier to recruit staff to work the traditional sort of business hours, Monday to Friday. So finding those for coming in earlier or extending or weekends still continues to be a little bit of a challenge. But I think that the shift to sort of more flexible schedules where individuals are working remotely and in an office or in their place hasn't had as much of an influence on parents requiring less childcare because they're working remotely. The kids would be consistently still requiring the same amount of childcare.
No, it's interesting. I had heard a few parents say that they were having trouble trying to find part-time daycare, and it really isn't the way our system is set up. Our system is set up largely for full-time daycare, but I get it that if you are genuinely working from home, you probably still need the childcare in many cases. But new people coming into the workplace, particularly people returning from maternity and others who may come back in a graduated return to work or something, being able to find part-time childcare commitment spaces is still a challenge, I guess, and that's and also shift work, as you mentioned. I think I hadn't heard that before, but that makes obvious sense. So happy to support it. Again, I think it's a modest amount of money for the amount of good that it does in the community. So I'll be supporting the recommendation. Are there any other speakers from council? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8.9, this is utilizing district-owned land for rental, social, and affordable housing. What we heard, and so we have some members of staff here present for this. I know Josh Cairns, you've got the report. Is somebody going to be introducing the matter? Is that so?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yes, Josh Cairns will give us an overview. This item is coming back after engagement that council authorized, and when we did this through a couple of the months in the spring. Quite happy to have gotten out there. Planners love to get out and hear and speak to people, and happy to have one of the first open houses, in-person open houses in a while. Another aspect that I think the district can be quite proud of is the fact that we do look carefully at our land and to reserve the precious land that we own and how we can use that to support affordable housing. This item was, sometime in the making, I'll say, in terms of having a really open public discussion around how and where to use and where to focus next. Council gave direction to staff to look at the two sites that Josh Cairns will walk you through briefly now. What we heard and the attachment in the report provides more detail. Thank you very much. With your permission, I'll turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Ms. Atfa. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. As Ms. Atfa mentioned, on December 13th, 2021, Council directed staff to engage with the community on some conceptual development scenarios that would support affordable housing on two district sites in the future. You'll recall those are 900 St. Denis Avenue, currently occupied by the Fire Training Center, and we have the southeast corner of Mountain Highway and Hunter Street. A public engagement plan that outlined our planned approach was presented to council at the regular meeting on March 21st, 2022. An engagement ultimately spanned a pretty significant 5-week period stretching through April and May this spring. During this time, staff heard from different members of the community through a pretty diverse range of events. This included online as well as in-person open houses, which were our first since the pandemic, along with stakeholder meetings and in-person pop-ups, which were more informal engagement activities located near the sites to really interact with people that were already in that area. In total, there were more than 500 touch points or interactions with members of the community across these events, and more than 700 people visited the project webpage to also learn about the work underway. Through the engagement, we heard several key themes in the feedback, including overall very strong support for using both the sites for affordable housing in the future, and also support for higher density options in order to maximize the number of affordable units that could be put on these sites. This includes a preference for 4-story apartment buildings on 900 St. Denis Avenue and up to a 25-story high-rise building on the corner of Mountain Highway and Hunter Street. Overall, feedback from those we heard from during engagement was quite positive, and a detailed summary of what we heard is provided in attachment 1 of tonight's report to council. Results from the public engagement will be used to inform the future vision for these sites, and these results will be considered along with some additional analysis, consultation with potential nonprofit housing providers, as well as council input to help determine potential implementation items. This will be brought back to council for consideration later this year or by early 2023. Thank you for your time, and staff are happy to answer any questions.
Council, is there anyone wishes to move receipt? Councillor Bond? Seconder? Go ahead, speaking, Councillor Bond.
Okay, did we get a seconder, Councillor Hansen?
I'll second.
Okay. Yeah, thank you to staff. I will move the recommendation on this report. I don't have any specific questions about the report. I think I did see some staff out at Sealand Park during one of the pop-ups, and so I'll just have a few general comments and reflections on the information that's been presented. As Mr. Kearns mentioned, I think that the engagement here does show strong support in the community for using both these sites to provide affordable homes for people in the district, and as well looking at the options to provide as many affordable homes as possible on these two sites. I think that those were two key themes that really struck out to, or stood out to me in reading the report. I almost wonder if we had had an option for 6 stories on the Saint Denis site, how that would have played out in the analysis and the public feedback. The one thing about this strategy, and it's something that I had advocated for a long time, is having these scenarios and these different scenarios presented to the public early on in the process. And I think one of the challenges that the last council had was a lot of these decisions were made in closed council meetings in terms of setting up partners, setting up projects before rezoning proposals were made. And I think, one of the great things that this council has done is we flipped that on its head. We're going out early to the community. We're getting this feedback, which then gives council a lot more confidence to move forward on these projects and kind of seek those partners and do the zonings that are necessary in order to attract the senior level government funding that would be necessary to provide deeper levels of affordability on these sites. The other thing that I found actually really interesting from this engagement particularly is, at least it seems, the pop-up events were so much more effective than the traditional open house. Having a room at the Holiday Inn or some other location compared to actually going to Phibbs Exchange and talking to people in their everyday life, or heading to Sealand Park or at Inter-River Park. Those seem to gather so much more feedback and input. Obviously not as detailed as a written survey online, but I think those types of events, now that we're doing more of them, I think that really pays off, and it really reaches a different demographic and a different group of people than would attend a traditional open house or even go online and fill out a online survey or participate in one of the virtual events. So I think that's something in seeing this, the detail that's been put into this engagement report is, from my perspective, that would be something that we continue and probably even do more of. I think it's a really good investment of our staff's time to get out in the community, to be at Phibbs Exchange or at where people are, at the, whether it's at Stong's or at a grocery store, talking to people about these important community issues. So I really appreciate the effort on that. And I guess the one question I would have for staff is what's next? So we've got this report, we've got support from the community for more homes on these two sites. What are the next steps that staff see going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Bond, through your worship. That's a good question. And I think building off of these engagement results, we're going to be looking at those in quite a bit of depth over the next couple of months and using those results to help inform a bit of refinement onto these scenarios so we can get a really good understanding of what might be appropriate on these sites. And we're going to combine that with some additional technical analysis to really get a sense of what's feasible, the constraints on the sites. And through that work, we'll be able to bring a little bit more of a in-depth discussion with council to figure out exactly what implementation might look like. One of the things to our benefit right now, as you mentioned, is we're doing this early in the game. So we're getting out of the more reactive nature where we're trying to figure out what sites might be appropriate in what forms. Since these sites are occupied right now, we do have the luxury of time on our side to have a bit more of these detailed discussions and figure out something that really works well and aligns with council's vision as well.
Mr. Milburn, you have additional comments?
Thank you, Worship. Just wanted to add to Josh's comments with respect to the land use and form of character and tenure mix, all these kinds of planning discussions. In addition to that, we'd be looking at continuing conversations with our major funding partners, such as BC Housing, possibly looking at updating our memorandum of understanding with BC Housing, as well as other nonprofit housing providers to keep them engaged and involved so that when we come back to council with further advice on the land use and development, we also will be able to come back with some advice on potential partnerships, potential funding sources, and what those high-level costs might be and options might be for council to consider when looking at exploring development of these sites. We are traditionally land wealthy in the sense that we have lands that can be brought to bear and brought into the process, but often don't necessarily have the capital dollars to construct or operate these units, and we do rely on working with our partners. So we'll be coming back with more advice to council on options as we go forward, likely later in the fall or early in 2023, all at council's direction. Thank you, Worship.
Thanks. And I think one of the important things that I would like to see is that even that technical and that financial analysis should also be done in the public. I think having, we're kind of have a direction for form perhaps, but I think when we talk about unit mix, levels of affordability, and potential partnerships in terms of whether we have market, a mix of market and non-market, those should also be scenarios that are discussed in public as well. So I'll end my comments there for the first round.
Okay, thank you very much. And for my own comments, very limited. I agree with much of what Councillor Vaughn said there. The only thing I will say is pop-ups in addition to some of the traditional locations, because I've attended the ones at the Atrium and recently that were attached to the Lynn Valley Library. You capture the great thing about a location like that, a civic location like that, is that you can both tell people to go there and you can capture people in and about their daily lives around there. It's hard to tell residents, okay, go and stand in Phibbs Exchange from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. If you go through there, you might get it. Some of those pop-up destinations are really to grab another group. But having those sort of consistent, grounded neighborhood spaces, like I love Lynn Valley Plaza as a spot for consultation, that helps grab another demographic as well. So in addition to the pop-ups. Councillor Curran, your comments.
Thank you. And if it matters, I was the seconder, which is fine, but you might need that for your So yeah, I just wanted to thank Councillor Bond for bringing forward the report that put this into motion. I think it's a really good process for us to have. I was pleased to see the way, the level of engagement and also the type of engagement. And I agree, it's not an or, it's an and. We can do it in different locations, but I think that it was important to meet people more where they are. I did have one question for staff about specifically reaching out to some of our partners. One group that is always left behind in the housing conversation is people with disabilities. And I know that need is acute. And I just wondered if there was outreach separately to some of our partners who support people in our community with disabilities specifically.
Thank you, Councillor Kieran, through your worship. Yes, absolutely. So we're building off of some of the momentum that we got from the targeted OCP review, where we started to build some networks with these groups and start to have some of those conversations. So we use those same channels to distribute with social service providers in the district to basically invite them to participate in the event. And at this stage, of course, we are looking at form and starting to figure out what might be appropriate on these sites. So when we are moving forward in the future and looking at some of the finer details about what project actually might come to fruition, what the units might look like, there's going to be room for more of those conversations as well.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think as much as we can do, just echoing also what Councillor Braun was saying about doing it transparently. I know for me as someone new, it was very enlightening to learn about the trade-offs between different densities, different mixes, different locations, and then the cost of those units and how that aligns with certain income levels. And so I think that piece being out in the open and engaging staff or engaging the public in that is really helpful. And as we get into some of the refinement around those scenarios, I just wanted to sort of share the potential that exists, I think, when we're doing things that the community can co-create. And it's really exciting for the community to be engaged in a different way. And I'm thinking of these places as I see them evolving being about share economy. So share bikes and share cars and shared gardens and shared childcare and beyond housing, because I think sometimes we get stuck in what we have now, which is housing in a different way. And I think that the future is definitely more of a shared economy. And so I like the idea of engaging people in those conversations. And I think a lot of creativity will emerge from that. But I'm excited to see this moving forward. I also wondered about, I think it'll come up more as we get into what is possible in terms of density and affordability. So there might be some interesting scenarios. There's some work happening around 6 stories versus 4 stories, for example, in terms of how many units and the mix of affordability. And so I think some of those scenarios are going to be important. And maybe staff could just briefly comment on the decision on the fire training center site, specifically between those 2 housing forms. I'm just wondering why that was the maximum that we started that conversation around that particular unit.
Okay, I'm going to go to Ms. Atfa.
Thank you very much to Councillor Curran. Through the mayor, I will ask Josh to speak a little bit on the St. Denis site. We were essentially, though, guided by the OCP and what was possible under the OCP without any change as the first scenario. And the second scenario was a small base or small additional density. If I could just make a quick comment about reaching out to other groups. We did have a number of small virtual meetings with a number of groups. It shows on page 12 of the report, or page 2 or page 612, the BC Nonprofit Housing Association, Habitat for Humanity, a couple others. So we did put out that invitation quite broadly. And we spoke with the 4 that are listed here. As Mr. Karen said, we certainly want to build on that. And if there are groups that we ought to reach out specifically, then definitely we'll want to do that, and we'll do that going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my last comment is just that location. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Cairns, were you going to add more comments about the St. Denis site?
Yeah, thank you for your worship. No problem. Yes, as Ms. Appa had indicated, so we had our base case, which is really what had been identified under existing policy direction, or where that policy direction wasn't existing, really a neighborhood or contextual fit. And that led us to townhouses, trying to look at more of the family-oriented housing as our scenario 1. For the second scenario, we also try to keep a similar methodology of an additional 2 to 3 stories. The reason we ultimately decided to test out the 4-story form was for a few reasons. One of them is due to the water table on that site. It does pose challenges with providing underground parking, and we figured with relaxations, we could still accommodate that within 1 level of underground parking, which should be fine. Anything beyond that, even with relaxations, we do get into some potential challenges with the water table. In addition, due to the scale of that site, even just at the western portion of it, the 4-story form was really able to provide an optimal number of units that housing providers typically do find as being very feasible for managing. So it kind of seemed like a sweet spot to test out. But with that said, the important thing is, of course, they're just conceptual scenarios, and it was to help the public understand some of the trade-offs between these different forms as a starting point. And through the feedback, we did hear quite a diverse range of opinions, support for the 4-story, but also looking at mixes of 4 stories in townhouses, 6-story forms. So there's a lot of feedback for us to go through there. But hopefully that answers your question.
And Ms. Atfa, you had a further response?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kern, back to you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. No, that makes a lot of sense, and with the water table, but since we're going to have all these share bikes and share cars, like we're just, we're not going to worry about that. But I do appreciate that. And the last thing I just wanted to add in is that in that community, as it starts to develop, some of the improvements around the cycling infrastructure and access to Mountain Highway has really changed the way that you can move around there. And I think the like access to the creek, you know, it is really a lovely community. And so I think it's exciting that it looks like a lot of people who are engaged in it were in that community, the majority of people. So I think that's cool that they're helping to shape the community that, I mean, we're all part of the community, but the people who live more in that area, I think were some of the highest respondents, which makes sense because of where the pop-ups were. But yeah, I think they'll have lots of good ideas as this moves forward. Thanks.
Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say I share the sentiment that of my colleagues tonight and the enthusiasm for this report. I think this was some really good engagement. I do want to thank Councillor Bond as well for getting the ball rolling on looking at these sites and staff for getting us to this point. I do think this was really good engagement. I agree that the pop-ups seem to be an effective aspect of this as well, versus, you know, and in addition, as been mentioned, to some of the more traditional engagement opportunities. I just wanted to comment on the fire hall site in particular, and one of the top three sort of themes that came up for other uses on the site was commercial space. And I just wondered if there was any specific types of commercial uses that were identified in some of those comments. You know, thinking to some of the nonprofits and social service agencies, I'm thinking, you know, maybe there's a fit there to provide some sort of commercial space. But I just wondered if there was any specific types of commercial uses that came up.
Mr. Cairns?
Through Your Worship. Yeah, I believe given the nature of the engagement and opportunities to provide feedback, and really with an emphasis on form at this point, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to go into in-depth of all the different types of uses we could accommodate, beyond, however, of course, indicating that there'd be an expectation that this site would, of course, provide a mix of uses to help contribute to a really livable community and help fill that need. On the attachment on page 24, there is a summary of some of the open-ended comments that we received, grouped by themes. And really the keynotes there are a majority that did provide additional information to help kind of provide supplementary data to their answer, indicated commercial, indicating uses like retail, shopping, grocery stores typically, along with a really strong preference for community or recreation facilities and parks and green and public space.
Awesome. I think there's some different sorts of things that we could do with that commercial space, but I'm really interested to see how this evolves and come back, how this comes back in more detail in terms of the different forms. But no, this is really great. I'm very supportive and excited to see it move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very supportive of this too. But I'm going to be the curmudgeon here now. I'm going to push back because housing is supposed to be a provincial and a federal responsibility. And the municipalities are hopefully going to, or hopefully still going to be able to say what our local municipality wants and what we need, and facilitate that for the municipality. And so I would hope that we don't drop the ball here on assuming that we have unending pieces of land that we can contribute towards affordable housing. We still need to keep the pressure on the provincial and federal government as well to come to the table more than what they have. It's their responsibility. And as we said earlier, you know, there are things that have been downloaded from the provincial and federal that have been downloaded to the municipalities. And the more that kind of happens year after year, the more we sort of maybe get a little more comfortable with taking that on our plate, whereas we could use those funds, if they would step up to the table, we could use those funds for other things in our community. So I just want to say, let's keep the pressure on the province and the federal government as well, but using our lands to be able to provide affordable housing, we're doing it with these two lots, and we've also gone ahead to try and get a metro offer over on Riverside. So I'm supportive of this kind of way if that's what we need to do to get more housing and more affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Mayor. Little one question of clarification for staff. The St. Denis site, what's proposed right now is only a portion of the site, if I remember correctly. There's a provision in there for, I guess, a wider planning exercise that would look at the remainder of the site, because that's quite a large site that could potentially accommodate either more housing or a variety of different uses. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yeah, that's correct. So additional analysis will need to be done there, but the western portion was deemed as the most appropriate for affordable housing for the near term, based on existing access, servicing, and the configuration of property lot lines to the south.
That's great. And one other suggestion, and I'm sure this is already on staff's mind, in my work on the Metro Vancouver Housing Committee and the Housing Corporation, a lot of the technical analysis that we are going to start to look at now for all of these forms, whether it's 4-story wood frame townhouse, 6-story, or even the higher height, 20 to 25 stories, has been done by that committee, and consultants and reports have been provided to the committee on mixed or on tall wood construction versus traditional concrete construction, on various heights and densities, and then different financial trade-offs and level of affordability. So there's been a lot of work that's been done, provided by Metro Vancouver and its consultant teams. So obviously lean on our colleagues. We are one of the member municipalities, but lean on a lot of that work that would help us further our analysis and take advantage of work that's already been done and we've already paid for. So thank you.
Thank you. Just my own comments on the matter. With the St. Denis Linmore site, I think that we should really be having our first discussion with the school district. I think we have an opportunity to use that land in conjunction with a revisioning of Linmore Elementary School. It is one of the oldest schools in the system. It's due for capital upgrades, and also, frankly, it's totally insufficient to meet the needs of the plans that we have in the general neighborhood. And so I think really before we go and shop this around to the community, we probably should address that question. Would it benefit, rather than having the school district do the traditional rebuild where they basically take over their school field and build a new school in the school field and then shut down the old school, would it make sense to build it in conjunction with sort of the eastern part of the fire training center, or some other connection further down Orwell, to make it so that you don't have to lose the field for a 2-year period or while you reconstruct an elementary school in the neighborhood. So I kind of think we should answer that question first, but in the long run, obviously, I want to see deep dive social and affordable housing constructed where district owns land. I just think that we should address that question with our partners first to make sure that our educational needs are being adequately addressed within the neighborhood. Mr. Milburn, your response?
Thank you, Worship. We've had some introductory, or I guess I could describe them as preliminary conversations with the school district. We do meet regularly with them as part of their capital planning committee to look at the redevelopment of schools, seismic upgrades, as well as new school needs. And so, as I say, we've had preliminary conversations, and we think we need, as you suggested, have some detailed conversations about this catchment, which is a bit of an odd shape, including Linmore, Lynn Creek, and Maplewood, and about the future growth in these areas and the impact that might have to school needs. So the answer is yes, we will be following up with the school district as you suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much. My comments will be brief. I'm very supportive of what's been undertaken so far. Thankful for staff for the engagement that's been undertaken. I look forward to the refinement of these scenarios and specifically to achieving a good volume of genuinely affordable housing on these district sites. Just a final comment, but I hope throughout all of this we consider wood frame and wood structures as opposed to concrete, because I know that's available to us, and we can be a leader if we pursue wood. So thank you very much.
Thank you. See no further speakers on the matter. The motion is to receive for information. I believe I wasn't in the room at the time it was moved and seconded, but I believe that's the motion. Okay, thank you very much for confirmation. I'll call a question on the motion. All those in favor, contrary minded, motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you for staff for all your work on that. Next up, we have item 810. This is the Climate Action Policy Update, Climate Ready Rezoning Policy for new Part 3 buildings. And just checking in, we have Ms. Jackson, Mr. Wright. I'm going to go to Carolyn Jackson for your comments first.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have a short presentation. I don't know if you'd like to hear it. It's about 9 slides or so, or
yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wright then to provide the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of Council and members of the public. I have a brief presentation on the proposed climate-ready rezoning policy that would apply to new Part 3 buildings as defined by the BC Building Code. These Part 3 buildings would include large multifamily, industrial, commercial, and institutional buildings as outlined in the report. The district is taking action in 6 key areas to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, protect and enhance environmental health, and improve our resilience to climate change. The policy being proposed this evening falls under the action area of low carbon buildings. The OCP action plan and previous council resolutions highlight the need to address embodied carbon in new buildings, the emissions associated with the construction materials like concrete and insulation that can make up a significant proportion of the overall carbon footprint of a building. The climate change adaptation strategy provides direction to strengthen building policies to consider climate change, including from heat waves and extreme weather events. As a summary, the proposed approach would help address 3 key challenges related to new buildings, including embodied emissions, extreme heat, and indoor air quality from wildfire and traffic-related air pollution. To account for embodied emissions in new buildings, under the proposed policy, rezoning applications would provide an embodied emissions report that discloses the greenhouse gas emissions of construction materials and includes measures to reduce embodied emissions, such as using lower carbon materials or design approaches. To address overheating in buildings, rezoning applications would include mechanical cooling for all new multifamily residential units, as well as passive cooling design measures, for example, shading devices installed in the exterior of proposed buildings. And to help address indoor air quality impacted from wildfire smoke or traffic-related air pollution, applications would include an air filtration system that meets or exceeds minimum performance levels that are consistent with industry best practices. Feedback received from industry stakeholders to date was generally supportive and included a preference for exempting in-stream development applications, which has been incorporated into the proposed policy. The district also received input from staff from other municipalities and organizations such as North Shore Emergency Management, Vancouver Coastal Health, and BC Housing. And the proposed approach is aligned with similar policies being considered in the region. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Council, looking for your response.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Kern. Is there a seconder on the matter?
I'll second, Your Worship.
Councillor Back. Councillor Kern, your comments.
Thank you, staff, for bringing this very important policy forward. I think that this has always been considered the blind spot of the building industry, and is something that we have been addressing both on our municipal buildings and now looking towards other Part 3 buildings in the future. Of course, we hope it will include Part 9 and all buildings, but I understand some of the limitations at this point in time. Yeah, this is something that we need to do. We don't, I think it's something that will make us one of the leaders in this space. And I would be happy to have staff comment on that, but I'm only aware really of Vancouver. And again, they operate under a unique charter, but they were one of the first municipalities in North America to set a target of 40% reduced embodied carbon emissions from 2005 levels to 2030. And so there is a lot of work happening in the region around this. There's lots of people that are quantifying what exactly do you measure when you're measuring embodied carbon, and how is that embodied carbon, how are those components measured in the life cycle of it? So from insulation, as Mr. Wright mentioned, so it is quite complex. But the other piece around the National Building Code, which I've done advocacy around as well, doesn't have a maximum, it has a minimum air temperature in buildings, but no maximum temperature. And so we're starting to recognize that maximum temperatures are super critical in the heat dome event. 600 plus people were killed, not because of the air temperature outside, but because of the air temperature inside. And certainly with increasing climate events, smoke events, we will need to have better air quality in the building. So I also really appreciated the staff mentioned the passive cooling, because there's so much research shown around how we can actually work with nature, trees, shading, and other things that are not around traditional energy sources that we think of to really design buildings differently. So I'm pleased to see this. I think this puts us in a leadership position. And it's a good start. So I'm happy to see it move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Back as a seconder, did you have any comments?
Just a brief comment, Your Worship, and I thank you very much to staff. It was a very clear report, and I agree with the council, with Councillor Curran's comments as well. I think these three things, embodied emissions, air quality, and cooling, are so important to consider as we look to the future and try and prepare our community for the impacts of climate change. And as Councillor Curran highlighted, the over 600 people that lost their lives due to being in very, very warm environments, hot apartments and condos. And I think having cooling just makes sense. Appreciate the consultation with industry that was undertaken as part of staff's work here. I wanted to ask about, and I know it mentions the potential to collaborate across the North Shore, but I think a similar report was brought forward to City of North Vancouver Council last week by Mayor Buchanan around cooling for new builds. And I just wondered if we are going to be working with the city and West Van to potentially have similar standards in this area.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Back, that is an area of much ongoing collaboration, both with the city and with West Vancouver. And I am aware of that recent motion considered by the City of North Vancouver Council just, I think, last week or the week before.
That's great. Yeah, I think the more we can work together across the North Shore and kind of have a standard would benefit everybody. But no, this is really great. I think to Councillor Curran's remarks, this is something that we can be proud of for sure as a community in taking these steps. So great work, and I'm happy to support the recommendation here tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to support these recommendations. I think they're very important. Thank you, Councillor Curran and Back, for your comments. I have become increasingly concerned about embedded carbon. This was much discussed at the recent local government, the Lower Mainland Local Government Conference in Whistler. As the report mentions, for new buildings, embodied emissions can exceed the lifetime operating emissions. And this is, of course, so true with concrete. And we're learning more about concrete and how the use of concrete can, in fact, defeat our climate goals. And of course, we did pass a declaration of climate emergency for a very good reason. And it would be a shame to have that declaration rendered insincere by ignoring embedded carbon in concrete structures, particularly very tall concrete structures. So I'm so glad to see this. We're going to have to wrestle with the issue of embedded carbon, and I am going to prophesy that it's going to, if we're taking climate seriously, we're going to find ourselves looking more favorably on wood frame structures, including tall wood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hansen. Next up, Councillor Kern.
I just completely lost my train of thought. Oh, I remember. I just wanted to ask staff if, as this is the first step for applicants to report on, which is important so that we have a baseline, where will the next steps be in terms of setting reduction targets as we look forward? Vancouver and a couple places around the world have also set those, and frankly, none of them can actually tell you exactly how they're going to do it. So I'm not looking to staff to say this is exactly how we're going to do that, but I think to Councillor Hansen's point, it really is looking at the entirety of emissions and through the life cycle, and that includes land use planning, and that's something that I keep talking about, is looking at the system in terms of transportation, roads. It's not just looking at one building, although it is important to also look at the construction of the buildings. And there's some interesting data around mass timber, when it accounts for soil. Like, there's lots of things to look at when we're doing these comparisons. So I would caution council to be very to appreciate the nuance that exists in this, and there's a lot of emergent science around this. But I wonder if staff could just give an update about what potential they see as next steps to actually set a target. How does this align with SEEP, which is 45%, which largely was operating. We don't have an embodied strategy yet, or consumption-based emissions, but I wondered if you could just speak briefly about consumption-based emissions more broadly. And then how we see setting actual reduction targets for embodied carbon in all construction. Certainly, there's some places around the world that no longer allow basements anywhere, for example. So it's definitely an emerging field.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Kern, I think you used the right terminology when you coined it as an emerging field, and it is certainly, we're taking a good first step here in terms of accounting for it, because it's not something that's been done before. It hasn't been accounted for. We really just focus on the operational carbon, and we call, zero carbon buildings based on really the operating emissions, but we really need to look beyond that and start looking at the embodied carbon. And really what this policy is intended to do is to set a bit of a framework and a bit of a process for beginning to actually account for those emissions, so that down the road, as we review the implementation and look at what's coming forward, we can look at then contemplating limits and targets at that point. And we will be monitoring the implementation of this policy and reporting back to council in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a question for staff. We're talking about the measurement of these embodied carbons. Could you give a little bit of information about how you go about doing that measurement, and have we done that for all of our facilities?
Mr. Wright?
Sure. Did you want to go ahead? I can. No. Yeah. So thank you, Your Worship, or thank you, Councillor, through Your Worship. We did do an embodied carbon report for one of our facilities to see how that process went. And also, there are a variety of online tools and resources and agencies that help support this work. I think part of that will probably be put in the guidance document that we have for applicants. And so we're hoping to have consistent guidance in the region with the City of Vancouver for calculated embodied emissions. And there are resources and tools available online to support that. Typically, it's an energy consulting firm that would put together the report, and they would quantify the different materials involved, like insulation, concrete, and so on, and there'd be a value for carbon for each of those materials. So you'd end up with a value for all the materials.
Thank you. You mentioned that we've done it for one of our facilities. How do we do it for all of our facilities? Because we want to be the leaders in this. We should be doing it for our own buildings.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Forbes. It's definitely something that we're actively working with our facilities group around. There's a lot of enthusiasm around demonstrating leadership through our own facilities, and it's something that we do intend to do going forward.
Okay, we'll have to put it on the agenda for the next year going forward here to try and move that up. Just one other thing. You've mentioned that you spoke with a lot of the stakeholders. Just curious, you said you had general positive feedback from them, but just curious what kind of timeline are they like this? This is coming up as of August of this year, August 1 of this year, with a 2-year window. If they've already got something going by basically in 3 weeks, 2 weeks. So I just wonder why there was, I mean, I understand the immediacy of taking action, but I just wonder how they felt about that timeline, if that was a little bit quick for them, if they were fine with it. What were their comments back?
Mr. Cairns? Or sorry, Mr. Wright?
Thank you. Yeah, so we didn't hear too many comments against the timeline. The one piece of feedback that we did receive was to provide exemptions for in-stream development applications. So we did provide that 2-year window. One other note is that the City of Vancouver has had embodied carbon reporting requirements since 2017. So I think that was helpful. So there is some familiarity in the industry. So it wasn't kind of a brand new policy approach.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. I see no further speakers at this time. Call a question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the last item up for discussion tonight is the return from the June 27th meeting of Council. The item 8.9 on that meeting will be 8.11 tonight. So councillors, in case you're looking for it, it is on the agenda from the June 27th meeting at the tail end, about page 383. Let's picks up. Councillor Curran, this is your report. If you want to introduce the matter.
I'll move my recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you. Is there a seconder on the recommendation?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Back. Councillor Curran, your comments?
Thank you. This is something I've been working on for a couple years, actually. So I'm excited to see it make it this far. In 2014, just a little bit of context, the district became a signatory to the North Shore Community Food Charter. And we then delegated the responsibility for advancing the food charter commitments to North Shore Table Matters, who's a community partner. And in order to continue to advance this critical work, which I think is made more the urgency around transforming our food systems is more acute than ever, that the North Shore Table Matters team has made these recommendations that are the 3 recommendations that I've shared. And I just want to, so that they are a shared municipal food planner, a North Shore food system strategy, and a food policy council. So I just want to make sure it's clear that this motion is actually just seeking council's endorsement on these North Shore Table Matter recommendations in principle only, pending staff reporting back to council with costs, grant opportunities, timelines, potential partners, as well as these priority actions that may help us to address food insecurity that have been highlighted from community partners and staff, that we're actually seeing a rise in people who are not able to access food in our community today. And then as one of the speakers brought up, some of the barriers around local food production that can be revisited through looking at zoning. So I'm hoping we can kind of keep this conversation high level. We don't need to discuss the specifics of a potential plan, the terms of reference for the Food Council, or any of the potential costs of a shared municipal food planner. because that would be something that staff would report back. So I put these in there because they were what was requested. And also I think it helps us to expedite and clarify the work that we would like staff to include. And it's not limited to that. Staff may have a lot of other great ideas. But I think it's important just to recognize what we're hearing, or what I'm hearing, and probably others are as well out in our community, that residents in town centers in particular have cited the lack of urban agriculture initiatives. There's wait lists for existing community gardens. Residents are experiencing barriers to produce small scale commercial agriculture due to outdated restrictive zoning bylaws. Love to see farmers markets. I know it's something we've tried in the past, but I think that we need to revisit that as well. It's great for mental health, supporting the local economy. It has a lot of co-benefits. I can't see my time. How am I? 1 minute. And yeah, so if council has questions around what a municipal food planner is and how this could potentially work, it is sort of it's not a very old discipline, and it's something that the Canadian Institute of Planners actually recognizes that food systems have historically been excluded from local planning, but there's lots of push around making sure that food is embedded in the way that we think and the way that we plan. And so we would be among the leaders to explore this opportunity. And again, I'm not saying that we will hire one. I'm saying that if we go out to the other North Shore communities, including Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish, and say we have this idea, our council has kicked the ball off, like we're in support. What do you think? That's what I'm looking for. And then the Food Policy Council is different than what Table Matters does in many ways. And the most important is that it actually would have council, so it has a government position on it. So it would have staff from the local government, and as well as a council representative like some of our other committees that we have. And some of the benefits that Table Matters identified as having a North Shore Food Policy Council would have over the current structure of Table Matters. So Table Matters is a network. They are not a policy body. They do not create necessarily policy. Is the diverse representation across the food spectrum, council support, active municipal staff participation, structured and consistent committee or community meetings, an interdisciplinary approach to problem solving, increased and sustained funding, ongoing sustained structure, and being actively supported by council can help legitimize those efforts. So I think this is something that I hope we will take a leap into tonight by supporting this as a first step. And again, staff will have to report back on the specifics of this, but I've laid out a lot of other great reasons this was identified in our OCP, and we haven't yet delivered on it halfway into our OCP. So I think a lot of that's outlined in the report, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Back, I believe you were the seconder on the motion.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank Councillor Curran for bringing this motion forward. I think it's an area where there's a lot of interest from the community on some specific ideas. Councillor Curran mentioned things like farmers markets, community gardens. We heard the speaker tonight talking about urban farming. I've certainly had an interest in it. I've attended a couple of the Table Matters meetings this term. I've also met individually with councillors in the city of North Van and West Van to try and move forward on some food, excess food sharing, because sometimes the problem is not so much access to food from the food banks and other organizations, grocery stores. It's getting it out to people that need it. And so I like the fact that this report is kind of all encompassing and could really address a number of these different concerns. I also really like that it is looking at working with the other two municipalities on the North Shore as well as the First Nations. I think that's really what's needed, is that we all kind of look at this issue together and share resources where we can. So I'm very supportive of it, and I'm glad that it's been brought forward. So I'm glad to support it tonight.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Murray.
You're muted.
Muted.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. So I have no problem with staff reporting back in regards to, some of the low-hanging fruit, pardon the pun, in regards to how we can remove some of those barriers. We have over the years put community gardens in, and certainly we had a garden down in Lower Lynn. Dykoff was there for many years, selling vegetables and plants on their property. The Seymour, my grandmother had an orchard on her property down in Deep Cove, and there used to be a farm on Old Dollarton that sold local eggs. So as we were once quite rural, we did have that sustainable feature in our community, and one that supported our residents. So I have no problem with staff reporting back on initiatives and possible partnerships with the other municipalities. But I would like to draw and use this opportunity to, talk about food security in the region and what's happening and some of the concerns I have, and how I think the municipalities and certainly Metro Vancouver needs to speak out a lot more in regards to what's going on with food security. You are aware of the Little Campbell River lands that were recently removed out of the urban containment boundary, allowed to expand 400 acres for the city of Surrey to rezone to warehousing and industrial. And there's another piece of property right now that you may be aware of, the Heppel Farm in Surrey, also 220 acres, a piece of property that's owned by the federal government. And they're looking at possible expressions of interest for that land. It's not contained within the agricultural land reserve, and it's a well-known farm. It produces between 30 and 50 million of portions of vegetables per year. It's a very fertile farm, predominantly potatoes, and it's been in existence for nearly 65 years. And this land was leased by the federal government, and now the federal government has deemed it surplus, and it could ultimately be sold again for industrial. So, I think it's great that we're looking out for our sort of corner of the world here. But we actually need to get quite vocal in regards to, the bigger picture in the region, and start protecting the land that actually is producing food and feeding the region and our growing population. Certainly years ago, we had a report from staff saying that we, eventually with climate change would become the California of the West Coast, in regards to our climate. And so, it's an initiative that I think we should also have staff, maybe provide some information in regards to the number of farms, for instance, that are for sale within the ALR lands. What is happening to our farming system? We need to communicate with the provincial government and the federal government on available land to be able to have food security. And there's a lot of work to be done in this area. Several months ago, when the Little Campbell River was being rezoned, there were 4 motions that were brought forward to the Metro Board, and one was to take industrial land and turn it into residential. Another was taking commercial land and turning it into residential, and then taking another piece of land that was commercial and turning it into a hospital, and then taking environmentally sensitive land and turning it into industrial. So there's all of this pressure on our land base, and obviously residential is the most lucrative, although light industrial is coming up very close second. It's a very lucrative land base right now, and we've got to start to manage all of these other important needs in our community, and food security, as Councillor Kern has brought forward, is obviously a critical one. And sadly, a lot of this land is being put up for hire and best use. And it's something that we really need to come together on within the region. And our own councils need to become very vocal in this regard.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Mary. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of comments or questions. I don't know if staff can answer them, but I have a question. The word local is used a lot here, and I would kind of like a definition of what local means in this report. Also, do we have any data on our DNV food security? Have we done any work on that already? I do, again, I'm going to push back again that the provincial and federal government have a lot of the responsibilities, and a lot of even the local government things we control with our bylaws, and we can make a difference there with bylaws. But I do think we need to, and much like Councillor Mary has just mentioned, you know, land is getting rezoned at the metro level. It's getting rezoned at the federal level, and we're losing our farming land. So is local Metro Vancouver, is local the North Shore, or is local DNV? I think I'd also like to see a report or a presentation come forward from some of the organizations that have been mentioned in this report, like Table Matters. I think this is a much bigger issue than just, and no disrespect to this report that's come forward, but I just think that we need to hear from so many other and get so much more information before we accept a recommendation like this. We need to be educated ourselves much more and vocal about this as well. And I'd just like to have presentations, a report back from staff. Again, like I said, some of the organizations that are mentioned here as well. And a definition around the local. I'd really like to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Can staff or Councillor Curran, you were the report writer, can you define local as it pertains to to this report?
Unmute. Again, I think it's important to keep this high level, and staff would certainly report back if this is in principle to look at a food strategy, which would define, I know that the attachment that I left does have I think a definition of local. I'm happy to define it as food that's produced in the North Shore, across the North Shore. But that I don't think that we need to do that right now. I think that the work would reveal what that definition is. And I wanted to echo Councillor Mary's points around how important this is as a regional approach. So I don't want to get bogged down in the specifics of what exactly it is, because I think that there will be lots of opportunities for staff to provide that information if council allows this to move forward. And then the other question around, what was the other question?
Councillor Forbes, you're muted. Councillor, you're muted.
Sorry, statistics on the DNV food security situation, the way it is right now.
Again, I would say that the staff could provide that information as we referred or deferred our implementation of the work around the commitment to the charter to Table Matters. And I think there's lots of opportunities to hear from all sorts of partners if this work moves forward.
I would just like to say that I think this is a really important subject, but I think before I would like some reports from organizations like Table Matters and some of the other ones that are mentioned on the final page of this report. I would like to see that stuff, and maybe we can include, we'll end up including everything that's in this report and have a more detailed report as well. So I'm looking for information before I make a decision. But my decision isn't that whether this is important or not. It's very important, but I also am looking for some information first. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Kern, your second time speaking. Oh, I see, sorry, before you do, I see Mr. Stewart wanted to add his comments. Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, just very briefly, Your Worship. I mean, there's no question that local production of food will likely not likely reproduce all the food sources that we have from California and et cetera, et cetera. But it's an opportunity and a way to encourage people to think about their properties, especially as we have so many in North Vancouver that are single family homes that might want to encourage local food production. So I just don't shut the door on this, because I think it's an opportunity to encourage people to think of alternatives. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Forbes, you've had your speaking time, so it's now Councillor Kern on second time speaking. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to echo Councillor Murray's very important points around ALR advocacy. This is a growing concern for all regions, but particularly around Metro Vancouver, as Councillor Murray has indicated. And so I do agree that we need to be a stronger collective voice around regional food security. And I also just wanted to echo something that Casia, the speaker, had brought up earlier, and that it's not just outdoor space, it's also looking at indoor space and roofs and really just rethinking the way that we approach food production in our municipality in different areas. And Mayor Little, I think we talked a little bit about that in terms of zoning. Again, there'd be lots of opportunities for staff to reach out to the community and come back. And I also just wanted to, a lot of the work that Table Matters has done with other partners is really talking about the food culture and food being really embedded in everything that we do. And so it's both a cultural, thing, it's a health thing, it's good for the ecosystems, like it's this very like whole systems thinking around food. And Councillor Back, you brought up the food recovery component of it. So there's places around the world that are like not allowing any of their waste to leave their community. They're turning it into compost to grow new food. So really thinking in terms of circular economy. And so anyway, I'm really excited and passionate about this, and I am, happy to answer any other questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'm going to lend my full support to this motion. This issue of a local food system strategy has actually been in front of council for almost a decade now, starting in 2013 with the adoption of the North Shore Food Charter, which was actually adopted by all 5 municipalities on the North Shore, the 2 First Nations, as well as the respective school districts. So the call for a food systems strategy was part of that food charter. And so I think starting to do this work now, even though we have taken our time to get to this point, I think is very important. And for all the reasons that my colleagues have mentioned about the importance of local food and the importance of here having a system in a dedicated strategy to address all those challenges and those opportunities that we have here in our community, I'm going to support this work moving forward. There will, my expectation is there will be reports and analysis done that will help us tailor any specific actions or specific directions that we give to staff or we work with our partners across the North Shore on, so that we're all working together. So I am looking forward to supporting that work moving forward and to seeing what the results are, because I know this is an issue for a lot of people in our community, and I'm very happy to support this.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Forbes, the second time.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I would be the first time, Mayor Little.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Little. I'll keep my comments extremely brief, except to say that I'm highly supportive of this. Anything we can do to improve local and increase local food production and improve food security across the district is obviously in the best interest of the district. And I thank Councillor Kern for bringing this matter forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, I just want to say, just because I ask for more information doesn't mean I'm against something. It means I want more information. So I'm saying that I would like some presentations. I'd like some information from staff. And I push back on the idea that I'm shutting the door on anything. I'm not. I spoke in favor of this. I think it's important. I'm asking for information. So I'm just a little annoyed that just because I asked for information, I'm closing the door. Thank you.
Yeah, I think people are trying to assure you, Councillor Forbes, that the point of this request, the way it's phrased, is to get those reports and get more information. That's why it's so high level in nature. Because I had similar concerns to you. Sorry if I may just go straight into my speaking time on this, but Councillor Curran and I were able to get together and have a chat, and she was able to address some of my concerns, specifically around, you know, what it looks like to commit to a food planner, what really our role in some of this is. The other things that we didn't talk about, Councillor Curran, you know, are, you know, what light does this shine on a lot of the producers and retailers in our community that are already selling locally? So people have the impression that when you have a farmer's market, that must be super uber local food. And there's lots of very local produce being produced in the Kins farmers markets and the Safeways and the Stongs of the world that are coming from, you know, at the furthest Fraser Valley, and also producing, you know, in hothouses in Richmond and Langley as well, and other food producers. So it does create a little bit of confusion in that, you know, that a farmer's market may actually be more local and it may not actually be. Where I think we had the discussion, Councillor Curran, on the success or challenges that the last attempts at farmers markets had, was that they ended up having to shift and pivot towards being sort of a merchant art market rather than a farmers market, because they couldn't make enough revenue. People were already doing their weekly shop at another facility, and so there just wasn't enough demand to warrant the farmers market staying. And so, you know, we've just had mixed success on that kind of a thing. Maybe we don't have the critical population to be able to make those things work on a consistent basis. Or maybe it's just simply that we actually have very high quality food sources already in our community. You know, when you go into the local food store, there's really good options available to you, healthy, organic, and all kinds of variety of options available to you already in your neighborhood, which makes it hard to compete. Anyway, I think that more information is better. I think this is seeking information and will help us make future decisions on the matter, and so I'll be supportive of the recommendation. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little. You know, I think, you know, one of the things that we saw during the pandemic was, you know, this expansion of, you know, a lot of what we identify in the District of North Vancouver as our single family neighborhoods. And people were able to get outside and be in, you know, their backyards. And one of the things that just, you know, and it's always been a part of our community, but one, you know, one system that grew exponentially was gardening. And people were out gardening a lot, and people were outgrowing their own food. I have, you know, a lot of friends that put gardens in their backyards, and I've had, you know, I have a lot of friends that have had vegetable gardens in their yards for years, decades. You know, growing tomatoes, growing carrots, growing lettuce, growing pumpkins. You know, the list goes on. I've got one girlfriend that you know, grows hot peppers in her yard and does very well at it. So there are a lot of people that already are growing their own food in the municipality. And, I think the idea of sharing those crops, because, lots of times they're so abundant, you just can't, you can't consume it all yourself. So sharing it within the neighborhood would be something, that the local neighborhoods, the local community associations could certainly, get that word out and put together programs that, do give back to those residents that don't have yards, and I think that's, there's a balance that we need to look at. And, there's a significant, amount of benefit that the neighborhoods that we have give back to the residents of the North Shore.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I see no further speakers on the matter. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary?
Aye.
Motion carries. Council, we're approaching our scheduled end time, but we do have about 20 minutes. If anyone would like to make a report. Councillor Emery, your hand is still up. I think that's from your last discussion. Okay. I see no one seeking to make a report today. We should have time at our July 18th meeting as well. Sorry, Councillor Emery.
Sorry, I was just going to report that a few weeks ago, and maybe Councillor Curran might want to pipe in as well. I was able to take part in Sea Cove's annual spring exhibition called Impact. And they're basically focusing or highlighting local impact makers. And I think I can speak for Councillor Curran and myself that we were both the subjects of students at Sea Cove that wanted to highlight our work in regards to Councillor Curran's. I'll let her speak for herself. My work was GUARD, Group United Around Responsible Development and the protection of the trail system in the Lower Seymour. And it was a really nice event, and I was happy to attend.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Back's hand.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to note my attendance at an event last Wednesday. I know Councillor Curran and Councillor Bond were also in attendance. It was called Housing for All, and it was a community conversation around housing issues on the North Shore. It was presented by North Shore Community Resources. They're doing one in each of the 3 municipalities. They had one in the city earlier that week, the one here in the district last Wednesday, and then they're doing one in West Van as well. And the one last Wednesday was held at the Lynn Valley Community Center. It featured a keynote speech by Andy Yan, director of the city program at SFU. And there was a really diverse group of people in the room and lots of great roundtable conversations around housing issues. So really enjoyed that event.
Mayor Little.
I missed Councillor Bond asking Andy Yan about his census review. What a shame.
Mayor Little,
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that it was Grace Leishman that highlighted me, and I just wanted to thank her for her project. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned her.
I know Grace. There you go. Okay. I was going to make a brief report. We were obviously we had Canada Day just this last week, and it was a great pleasure to be down at the shipyards area. We had the HMCS Edmonton and HMCS Brandon in, and also the organizers made a special effort to create an area for first responders. And so we had the DNV firefighter charities, and we City of North Vancouver were also present, it was a great opportunity to thank them for their work in the community. But I just, again, I know a tremendous number of volunteer hours go into pulling off an event like the Canada Day event there. And just wanted to express my appreciation to the Lionsgate Rotary Club and Stan Van Werken and the organizing team that put that event together. They did a fantastic job, well attended, and looked like a lot of people having a great time with the beautiful weather that we had. So thank you to the organizing group and all the people that volunteered for that event. Councillor Bond?
Well, yeah, you did miss quite a good discussion between Andy and myself about the census data. And I'm looking forward to when he adds his flavor to his analysis from the income data that's coming out later this month. One of the things I think that he presented a wide range of different data sets. And one of the things I thought was most interesting was comparing the age of different age categories in the district over the past 20 years compared to the metropolitan region. And one thing I think there was some gasps in the room actually is that for every age category under the age of 45, or I can't remember if it's 45 or 50, the district has lost population over the past 20 years. Whereas in the region, it's the opposite. So I think there's some really interesting data, and we had a really good discussion, Andy and I, about past data and trends and looking at future needs and what are the trade-offs and balances, as well as the kind of the ongoing discussion about housing and population and how all those things mix, because they're actually it's actually quite a complicated process, and he had a bit of a flow diagram there of how that might work. So it was an excellent discussion, and as Councillor Back mentioned, there was some really good conversations around all of the different tables and some pretty challenging questions for Andy to answer from the crowd. So
I missed a good one. Thank you very much for your reports. Council, I see no further reports, so
move adjournment.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I will accept adjournment. And once again, thank you very much to all the members of staff for all the work they did in preparing the reports for tonight's discussions. Thank you, Council, for coming to the decisions you did, and also send appreciation to the members of the public that participated tonight and stuck with us. Everybody have a fantastic week. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.